Okay, there we go. Yes, I'm getting old. I'm like, where's the recording button? I'm like, how does this work? All right, here we go. All right, first we'll do the meditation on Shiva. Dhyaye nityam mahesham rajatagirinibham charu chandravatamsam ratna kalpojvalangam parashumargavarabhyeti hastam prasannam padmasinam samantat stutam amaraganairvagakittim vasanam vishvadim vishvabijam nikhila bhayaharam panchavaktram trinetram. Om Namah Shivaya. Karpura Gauram Karunavataram Samsarasaram Bhujagendraharam Sada Vasantam Hridayaravinne Bhavam Bhavani Sahitam Namami Kailasapītāsana madhya samstam bhaktaischa dhivisevyamanam bhaktartidavanalamak prameyam dhyayed umalingita vishwarupam om dhyayed umalingita vishwarupam om shanti shanti shanti. Dhyaya nityam mahesham rajata girinibham. One should meditate always and eternally upon that great Lord who shines like a mountain of silver, adorned by the crescent moon. His limbs flash as if ornamented and bejeweled. Ratna kalpod ujvala angam. He is that Lord who is seated in the lotus posture, padmasinam, who is smiling and pleased and who is absorbed in the deepest meditation, holding an axe and a deer in his two left hands and presenting the mudras of fearlessness and boon-giving in his two lotus-like right hands. All about him, gods and demons are praising him and singing hymns to him. He is the ground upon which the universe rests and the seed from which it springs forth. He is the five-faced revealer of the tantras, the clear light of consciousness, the dispeller of fear, the three-eyed Trinity, Lord Shiva. May this be an offering at his lotus feet. He who is the incarnation of compassion, shining without any residue, like karpura, like camphor. He is the one who is always abiding in my lotus heart, along with his consort Bhavani. One should meditate always on Shiva and Uma, who are embodied as this entire universe, Vishwarupam. Om, peace, peace, peace. Om Gurubhyo Namaha Ganganeshaya Namaha. Jai Shri Ram Krishna. So last week we had a fascinating discussion. Also, Elizabeth, it's good to see you today. Hi, welcome. So it's a nice conversation that we had last week, and I want to revisit it a little bit because we were talking about two approaches in Tantra. In fact, the week before that, we were in Denver, and we also presented another kind of dyad or dichotomy. So broadly speaking, there are these two dyads, these two dichotomies that you find in the Tantric world that are reconciled with reference to a third thing. So actually there's so many of these dichotomies. You could say the world and spirit, for instance. In what sense is Prakriti matter and Purusha, spirit, dichotomous? And in what sense can they be reconciled in some third reality like Shiva or Brahman? So the idea of matter and spirit, the idea of dynamism and stillness, the idea of movement or sound and silence, these are of course all dichotomies that find their reconciliation in the idea of Parama Shiva or Kali, that one which reconciles what seems to be two mutually exclusive opposites, right? But there's another more practical consideration, theology and philosophy aside. On a practical note, when we come to the Tantric tradition and we consider the primary sources called the Tantras, we find that broadly speaking, there are two different approaches in Tantra. And this we addressed in Denver about a week or two ago when we had that retreat. So we presented these two approaches as mutually exclusive and often as somewhat antagonistic to one another. And the first approach, and we'll talk a little bit about the Pashu-bhava versus the Vira-bhava thing again to review some of the material from last week. But mainly this week, I want to explore the Divya-bhava. And because yesterday was Akshaya Tritiya and Mātangī Jayanti, I want to say a few things specifically about Mātangī and about the poetry of impurity. I want to talk a little bit about Anandavardhana, and before him, of course, we can talk about Bharata's Natya Shastra, all of these wonderful aesthetic theories that are assimilated by the Shaiva non-dual Tantric tradition. And here you'll see that these aesthetic theories are used, like the theory of Dvani in Anandavardhana, Anandavardhana, and the theory of Rasa in Natya Shastra of Bharata, you'll see that these theories, these ideas, although they apply to aesthetics, the philosophy of what makes poetry poetic or what makes art beautiful, although they are primarily understood in that context, you'll see how these ideas are essential in understanding Shaiva soteriology and Tāntrik practice and theology. So like we'll see how Abhinavagupta uses Shanta Rasa, the Nava Rasa, the ninth flavor, in order to make sense of the 8 or so flavors that we get in Natya Shastra. And the rasas in Natya Shastra are not necessarily 8, they're like 4, but dyadically, they're 4 dichotomous with another set of 4. So there are 4 emotions on this side, 4 emotions on that side, and the dyads in here between all of these different emotions. For example, like the opposite of happiness is sorrow. So the hasya rasa, the rasa of like a comedy or laughter, that's juxtaposed by the karuna rasa, the rasa of like sadness and compassion and empathy. Or you could say shringara, one of the most primordial rasas in art, the erotic or the sense of love or attraction. That erotic flavor is diametrically opposed to bibhatsa. Bibhatsa means a sense of disgust. So disgust and attraction, or rather you could say raga, attraction, and dvesha, aversion. You can see that these are like dichotomous, and yet, although they are dichotomous, they sort of involve one another, like the obverse and reverse of the same coin. And we gave that example last week, how sometimes when you enter into an erotic experience, at times you can be disgusted by the whole situation. You're like, what am I putting my mouth into again? Like, you're like, what? And then vice versa. Sometimes you experience something that's like revolting, and then you feel a strange thrill or a strange kind of pull towards it. Like I gave the example of the children who want to go and look at the roadkill. You know, they're just like fascinated. They want to see something disgusting. Like we're drawn towards those things that are disgusting, and we're kind of pushed away sometimes, repulsed by those things that are alluring. So you'll notice that these two dyads, the Shringara Rasa, the erotic sense, and the Bibhatsa Rasa, the disgusted sense, they involve one another. And then you could say Bhayanaka, the sense of fear, is juxtaposed by a Virya, a sense of heroism or courage. But you can't have courage or heroism without fear, and there's something about fear that brings out that heroism, and there's something about being a hero that inspires fear. You'll see that Vira Bhava or Virya Bhav and this dichotomous opposite called Bhayanaka, they go hand in hand, you see. And then Raudra, the sense of rage, like all of these are dichotomies that we find in Anandavardhana, this early aesthetic philosopher. No, even before that, Natya Shastra of Bharata, you find these rasas there. Abhinavagupta is going to take these 8 rasas and he's going to reconcile all 8 with another category, a meta category, which he calls Shanta Rasa. I hinted at it last week, but we didn't really get into it because we were talking mostly about the Pashubhava versus the Vira Bhava and the right-hand path, orthodox institutional tantra, otherwise known as Shaiva Siddhanta, comparing that to the left-hand path or somewhat more Kaula-oriented Vama tantras, and understanding that in light of the 2 different bhavas. Last week's talk was supposed to be called 3 types of people, 3 types of tantra, and I really intended to go over the 3 different modes, exploring how they relate to the Sankhyan gunas. I was going to present Tamoguna, Rajoguna, and Sattva guna, and make a case for the 3 modes of tantra, the Pashubhava, Vira Bhava, and Divya Bhava, as corresponding to these 3 gunas respectively. And then I was going to present the Divya Bhava and the Sattva guna, and make a claim that like the Vāmācāra and the Kaulachara is no less sattvic than the Dakshinachara. Like the goal of spiritual life, like I said last week, is sattva maxing. The whole thing is about cultivating sattva. But I wanted to give another sense as to what sattva means, and point to it cognitively, psychologically, and show how it feels to cultivate sattva. And once we can articulate that, we can show how there's a poetics to impurity. We can show how even Bhayanaka, fear, which we often encounter when we look at images of Kali or Bhairava, which are meant to inspire fear, we can see how in that context, a fearsome image or a disgusting image of Kali dressed in entrails, or like Adbhuta, the experience of wonderment when you look at Ma Chinnamastaka chopping off her own head. It's going to be Chinnamastaka Jayanti soon. And you see she's smiling, her 2 attendants are smiling, and you see there's a comedy to it. There's a sort of absurd comedic element to the fact that they're all laughing about their own decapitation and their own blood consumption. That's the Hasya Bhava. But there's also this Karuna Bhava, because Kali, in the form of Chinnamastaka, feels compassion for her accomplices. They're hungry, and so she wants to feed them. So moved by compassion for them, Karuna Rasa, she gives them the blood. But there's also this bibhatsa, this disgust of like, oh my god, this is terrifying. There's blood spilling everywhere, and they're drinking the blood. And why would the attendants drink the blood of Parvati? And why would she drink her own blood? There's this bibhatsa combined with bhayanaka, like fear. It's terrifying. She's supposed to be Rahu, Ketu, personified, both the head and the tail, the Kaput and Kauda Draconis, and like these are the malefics, the dark planets in our astrology, and we're like looking at that and we're threatened by her. And of course you've been exposed to a lot of internet Hindu superstitional tantra, so like obviously you know to be afraid of Chinnamastaka. So when you look at her, you feel frightened. Her Sahasranama introduces her as Ghora, Chanda, Prachanda, Ghora, Mahagora. She's terrifying, she's fierce, and so you feel frightened. But at the same time, you also feel a sense of awe. She's smiling, they're smiling, disgust, they're drinking the blood, fear because she's a scary deity, but also awe. Also the sense of what the fuck is going on here. Wonderment, amazement. There's so many rasas like just coded into that Chinnamastaka image you can see. But importantly, these are rasas that we typically avoid in spiritual life. Like I was making the point last week, we want to gravitate towards compassion and sweetness and gentleness and kindness. And we think raudra, anger, or fear, bhayanaka, or the sense of disgust or shame or guilt. We think all of these things are unspiritual, these darker negative emotions. And we label them as bad, and we label those other emotions as good, and thus we create this sort of dichotomy where spirituality is moving towards good emotions, cultivating good emotions, and feeling good emotions. What is not spirituality is the experience of anger, shame, guilt, fear, remorse. Like those things are, in our popular understanding, not considered spiritual. And so then we create all these pretenses and facades around what we think makes spirituality spirituality. Given all of that, the challenge that we get from the Kaula Marga and the Vāmācāra, the challenge that Matangi personifies uniquely is this. Those same emotions that were rejected in the name of spirituality can be reclaimed as not obstacles, but as means for an even deeper, more inclusive, more wholesome spirituality, a true non-duality, if you will. And so with that in mind, Mātangī Devī, who is the personification of poetry and music and art, but with a nuance. She's not just like Saraswati or Paradevi personifying the heightened, sophisticated arts of culture. She is specifically the wild-haired, drunk, outcast goddess who personifies the very highest that culture has to offer. So it's a particular approach to art, I think. It's an approach to poetry, it's an approach to spirituality that is ucchistā, that is impure or despoiled, or transgressive, and like that we can see captured by the Kaula Marga and Vāmācāra when they approach bhayanaka, fear, or when they approach raudra, anger, or when they approach bibhatsa, disgust, and when they use all of these rasas in their personification of God as say Kali or Bhairava or Chinnamastaka or what have you. So working with these darker emotions and understanding how they can lead to emotional highlights, otherwise known as rasa, working towards how they can take us beyond the experience of the mundane mind, that's something that I want to explore today, just because it was Matangi Jayanti and Akshaya Tritiya last night. That's the main theme of tonight's lecture. I want to go in with some finer brushstrokes and explain a bit more about Sattva and its relationship to Rasa, especially as understood by the Kashmiri Shaiva masters like Abhinavagupta and others. And then after doing that, we can explore art and we can see how all the modes, all the emotions that art will elicit, after all, art is called vibhava in Natya Shastra, some external thing that can elicit an internal response. We'll see the mechanics of art, the way poetry and music and painting and of course dance and theater, the way those things can bring us to a recognition of our own essential nature, which is inviolably free, pure, and eternally endowed with the powers of willing, knowing, and doing, and the powers of language, representing, reflecting, articulating. So that realization that I am Shiva, in which inheres the infinite power, the Ananta Shakti Paripurna, that realization can be given through art. But to explain the mechanism of that, the psychology of that, the dynamics of that is the purpose of this lecture. So that's ultimately what I want to talk about, right? But before I do that, let's just like review some of the dyads and dichotomies we've already been introduced to as per last week's lecture and the lecture prior to that in Denver. So going back to the Denver lecture, this is the first dichotomy that I put in front of you. The dichotomy between those tantras that represent interior, contemplative inquiry, as opposed to those tantras that represent external ritual or ceremonial activity. So I want to contrast inquiry to activity, or meditation to ritual, or contemplation to action. In other words, to use Sanskrit here, I'm contrasting jnana, the path of knowledge, to kriya, the path of action. You could also call this jnana yoga or karma yoga, broadly speaking. Remember, what Bhagavad Gita offers to the Indian spiritual tradition is a complete revolution in our understanding of the word karma. Nowadays, we take it for granted. We think karma yoga is like an act of service. So we say karma yoga is that thing which you do to help another individual. So when you're doing seva, we often call that karma yoga. But not so. In the traditional understanding of karma, we use the word to mean Vedic rituals actually. So karma yoga is that path to spiritual realization that involves ritual activity. Specifically, those rituals as enjoined by the Vedic corpus. So in the Rig Veda, in the Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda, you'll see most of it is just about rituals. The vast majority of verses in the Vedas explain how to do rituals, when to do rituals, how to do rituals, who should do the rituals, step by step, mantra by mantra, they walk you through various rituals, like the Ashwamedha Yagya, the horse sacrifice, or, like you'll see even in the Upanishads, there's a strong emphasis on ritualism. When Nachiketa in the Katha Upanishad goes to the house of death, there he meets Yamaraj, and the first thing that he asks to learn is a ritual. And Yamaraj teaches him a ritual, which he masters very quickly. Impressed by Nachiketa's ability to master the ritual, Yamaraj names that ritual after Nachiketa. And he calls it the Nachiketa's Yagya or something like that, the fire sacrifice of Nachiketa. So even in the Upanishads, which have more of a Gnostic contemplative emphasis, even there you see a strong emphasis nonetheless on Yagya, on ritual. Even the Yajur Veda, the whole Yajur Veda, the word Yajur comes from the root that's the same as Yagya, sacrifice. So it's the Veda of sacrifice. And so essentially, Yaga or Yagya means sacrifice, but that sacrifice is ritually understood to mean fire ceremony. Yeah, so Yagya means Homa, more or less. So the vast majority of the Vedic world is devoted to this activity called sacrifice, Yaga or Yagya or Homa. So most of what you expect to find in the Vedic corpus will be about this. We call this the karma kanda. Kanda means portion, karma means action. So in the Vedic revelation, the vast majority of verses in the Vedas are going to be about action, and action specifically with the intention of performing rituals. And what are the rituals for? Again, they could be for any number of reasons. Like they could be for bringing rain, or getting more crops, or like helping the gods vanquish the asuras, which would ultimately mean more rain and more cows and more crops and more minerals from the earth. Like it could be for some worldly outcome. This we call bhoga. So anything that you're doing, ritually speaking, to make your life better on earth is considered bhoga. But more importantly, bhoga is not limited to just that which you can enjoy on the earth. In the Vedic cosmology, in the Vedic understanding of the universe, we know that there are subtler planes than just the earth plane. There are other realms in which you can experience sensory pleasure. And so what you can experience through the body is actually very limited. If you're in Gandharva Loka, the realm of the fairies, or if you're in, Apsara Loka, Gandharva Loka, or otherwise known as Indra Loka, or if you're in like Naga Loka, or any of these other planets, Pitri Loka, for instance, the hall of the heroes or the ancestors realm, like there are certain pleasures that you can enjoy there that are far greater than any pleasures that you can enjoy here. These pleasures are merely reminiscent of some of the exalted celestial pleasures you can have in some of these other realms. So the goal is still bhoga, but it's bhoga understood on a wider cosmic scale, if you will. So then you perform these rituals not just to grant yourself pleasure and success and happiness in the now and in the here, but also in the then and in the hereafter. So after the body passes away and the soul transmigrates, the goal of performing these rituals is to grant access to the practitioner into these celestial realms. But the interesting thing is you can only hang out there for as long as your karmas allow you. So you accumulate punya, you accumulate merit, and it's like going to a hotel, as my guru likes to say, and then you have like a kind of a prepaid card that gives you 2 or 3 weeks in that hotel, but once you run out of like funds, then you come back, as it were, and you reincarnate into this world. And this world is otherwise known as the karma bhumi, the place where you work out your karmas. And so in this sort of intermediary realm, you do the rituals, and if you do them correctly, not only will you have a good time here, but you'll have a good time in the hereafter. And that's just bhukti or bhoga, the pursuit of pleasure and success, which is understood both in the here and in the hereafter. That's why it's so wonderful when Swami Vivekananda comes to this country and he says, the goal is not to teach you how to get to heaven, it's to teach you how to stop wanting to go to heaven. Because heaven, the goal of heaven, is still not that different from the goal of making life a heaven. The goal of having a lot of money and accumulating a lot of fame. Like all of that is understood to be the quest for bhoga, the quest for pleasure. Now the goal of karma, action, which is again understood to mean ritual action, is to secure this kind of bhoga. Yes, that's really all it is. But now something interesting happens. We understand that there's another goal also. It's not just about bhoga, but at no point is bhoga demonized. Now, I think because of the influence of Christian missionaries in India, it's become very fashionable for Indian yogis and Indian gurus to demonize bhoga. That is so contrary to the Vedic ethos. That is not at all in keeping with the life-affirming attitude that our rishis had when it came to pleasure and success. The rishis felt like it was incredibly valuable for a human being, or for any being for that matter, to acquire at least 3 things while they had life. They should acquire, first and foremost, the sense of righteousness, dharma, which here means understanding what rituals to do in order to secure the other 2 goals. And what are the other 2 goals? Simply wealth or meaning and pleasure. So with wealth, one can have more pleasure. The more wealth you have, the more pleasure is available to you. And maybe vice versa. The more your pleasure, the more at ease you are, the more able you are to create meaning in life. But usually it's artha that produces kama. Very rarely is it kama that produces artha. For example, if all you cared about is pleasure, you might spend all your money on drugs or something, and then you would be financially ruined. But vice versa, if you had a lot of money, then you would have access to any kind of drugs that you want. So having money first and then getting a drug habit is way preferable to getting a drug habit and then trying to get money. If you're already addicted to drugs, it's going to be hard to build wealth. But once you're wealthy, party time. You can enjoy your drug addiction to your heart's content if you have a continual stream of income. So if we think of like pleasure as being the outcome of wealth, then it makes sense to try to make wealth first. But how do you make wealth? Allegedly, according to the Vedic understanding, by aligning yourself with the forces of the universe. By stepping into a certain flow and a certain currency, you bring wealth into your life, which at that time was understood to be like cows and crops and minerals and whatnot. At this time, it's like the numbers that are on your screen, on your bank account or something like that. But whatever the currency is, being in line with the flow of the universe means wealth. It means artha, but artha can also mean like leaving a legacy, it can mean fame, it can mean prestige. So all of these things can be given to an individual through the proper performance of rituals, otherwise known as karma yoga. So karma yoga, it's called karma when it brings in artha, and artha also importantly will bring in kama. So when we put these 3 things together, dharma, artha, kama, we see that these are valid goals in life and literally what like everybody should be spending their time doing. Dharma here means understanding the Vedas, understanding the overarching structure of the cosmos, and then participating in a wholesome and aligned way with that overarching, what is called rita or rhythm of the universe. So rita and dharma are almost interchangeable words. Rita, literally like the English word rhythm, means the way that the universe works, the rhythm of the cosmos. And dharma is that which is revealed in the Vedas in order to be aligned with rita. In other words, to be in rhythm with the ultimate nature of reality, one should practice dharma. And dharma means way more than just a morally righteous and ethical life. Of course, dharma includes that idea too, how it is to be like in society, and in society again doesn't mean just with human beings, but with, ancestors, the pitris, with animals, bhutas, with ghosts, even with disembodied entities, gandharvas, apsaras and whatnot. What it means to be in community and to be in society in the Vedic world is not just how we relate or react to people, but to animals, to the needy, to the gods, to the ancestors, and to the various disembodied beings that we have around us. So proper functioning in society, here society understood in the broadest possible sense, proper functioning in society is called dharma, and you learn how to do that through the study of the Veda. So the Veda is apaurushaya, it's not revealed by any prophet, person, or god. It's simply the way things are, and that's been discerned by the rishis who had the subtlety to access that, and they've revealed it in the form of the Shruti, the form of the Vedic revelation. And then the Smriti is the attempt of human beings to make sense of the Shruti, and this whole thing is presented to you as a literature, as a corpus of ritual materials and philosophical exegetical materials. And now once you receive that, you study that, and once you understand what the rituals are like and how to perform the rituals, once you have the right mantras, you do those rituals. That's called karma yoga, you see. Karma yoga means any action that you perform, but is it yoga if it's about bhoga? Now this is where the debate comes in. If you're doing rituals to grant yourself worldly success or otherworldly success, then your goal is bhoga, which again is not at all demonized in the Vedic context. It's perfectly legit for a person to aspire after these things, right? But arguably that's not all. There's something deeper to life. Like a person could have all the cows in the world, they could have all the money and all the success in the world, but they still might not be totally satisfied. It takes a little more than that to find ultimate fulfillment. So in the Bhagavad Gita, there's this beautiful idea of an achievement, a kind of achievement that having achieved, nothing higher can be achieved. you just get the sense that the purpose of life is fulfilled. Even if you make a lot of money and acquire a lot of fame or acquire as much pleasure in the world as possible, even if you enjoy the pleasures of the afterlife, which if we take the Taittiriya Upanishad are quite considerable, even then you won't be totally satisfied. There'll be the sense that there's something still left undiscovered. But when you attain this thing, which the Bhagavad Gita says nothing higher can be attained, you'll just get that internal sense that you're fulfilled in a much deeper way than anything that wealth or pleasure could have possibly provided. This is called moksha. And according to Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, this is the sort of thing that once you have it, makes you immune to all suffering. Na gurunapi Na dukhena gurunapi vichalyate. Shri Krishna defines this as that which categorically ends all your suffering. Na dukhena, no kind of suffering, however heavy, gurunapi vichalyate, it will not be able to shake you. The thing about worldly success is that you find the world is always changing. And so any success you have in the world, whether in terms of wealth or pleasure or prestige or power or position, those things are also susceptible to change. So if you have a certain amount of money today, you might be broke tomorrow, and vice versa. If you have position today, you might not tomorrow. You might be the guitar player of the band Twisted Sister, and then tomorrow Kurt Cobain shows up, and then grunge executes hair metal. And then what are you going to do? You were the coolest rock star yesterday, but then Kurt Cobain just executed that entire genre which you're a part of. And so that happens in the world. Grunge will become at some point unfashionable, and then whoever is the big grunge star at the time will no longer be as relevant as they were in the 90s when grunge was fashionable. So because trends are always changing, people are always changing, we always want something new. Money, power, prestige, and even pleasure is fluctuating, especially given pleasure's transiency. Whatever brings us joy and pleasure, it comes and it goes so quickly. And often the thing that we need to do to get pleasure is more and more and more as we become desensitized to pleasure. It's like the Oscar Wilde kind of dilemma, where the more pleasure you chase, very soon you find very little pleasurable. I think it's in Razor's Edge, right? Somerset Maugham says, is it Oscar Wilde or Somerset Maugham? Somebody once said, some intellectual once said that the person who lives for pleasure will very soon find nothing pleasurable. There's a kind of inherent catch-22 when it comes to pleasure. The more of something you have, the less pleasurable it's going to be. I think it's Somerset Maugham who said that. But he met Ramana Maharshi, interestingly. But that isn't a demonized pleasure, mind you. It's not that pleasure is problematic. It's not even that wealth is problematic. It's just limited. You can have as much of these things as you want, but it won't ultimately satisfy you. So then what Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is suggesting is that all that's well and good. And by the way, this is a very rich man talking to another very rich man who both have a lot of pleasure in their life and a lot of success and a lot of prestige. These aren't two dusty ascetics who have never once had sex, who have never had any money, who have never enjoyed the good life, talking about philosophy. These are people who are at the very top of the game as far as the world is concerned. It's a householder, a Kshatriya, Krishna, a prince talking to another prince, and both of them are discussing the highest philosophy, having enjoyed what the world has to offer. And interestingly, this thing that Shri Krishna is presenting now as another goal of life, beyond just the performance of ritual to secure both power and prestige, beyond just to preserve wealth and create more wealth and enjoy pleasure. Beyond just that, this new goal is that which, having attained which, nothing higher can be attained. And according to Shri Krishna, this means na dukhena gurunapi vichalate. Not even the heaviest sorrows can shake you. So in one sense, this is the solution to the changing, fluctuating world, which inflicts sorrow. Everything you gain, you lose. And that brings sorrow. But this thing, whatever the fuck this is, when you attain it, you will never have any sorrow anymore. Na dukhena gurunapi vichalate. Shankara gives another definition which I like. It's the kind of thing that grants you atyantika dukkha nivritti, the permanent and categorical end of all suffering, as well as, this is an important definition also, because it's not just about the end of suffering, it's also about the attainment of something. Paramananda prapti, the attainment of supreme bliss. And having attained this, nothing else would be needed. So if you have this, nothing else matters. And if you don't have this, nothing else matters. So the argument here is that you only have zeros until you have this one. But once you have this one, as Sri Ramakrishna would put it, any zero that you add after the one only increases the value of the one. So having this one, you don't need any zeros, but any zeros that you add on top of it will actually make the one better, arguably. And that's a deep metaphor, and we can unpack it later, because you can see how returning to the world and returning to artha and returning to kama while you have this moksha is actually possible. Moksha doesn't have to be the thing that takes you beyond dharma, kama, and artha. It might actually be the thing that makes you good at dharma, kama, and artha. It might actually make kama and artha more meaningful once you acquire it. But you don't need kama and artha at the point that you acquire it, because once you acquire it, according to Shri Krishna, you are beyond all suffering, and you've attained that thing which is most worth attaining, which is deeply blissful, deeply rewarding, deeply fulfilling. So this is called moksha. Now, if we take the Chandogya Upanishad seriously, yoga as such is any practice that gives you moksha. So yoga, again, the word yoga, the root of that word is yuj, and yuj is one of the oldest dhatus in the Sanskrit language. Some of the dhatus in the Sanskrit language are truly primordial and truly ancient. Dhatu meaning root or verbal root. And so here yoga is one of those roots, yuj. And you'll see in the English language, it's synonymous with the use of the word use. In the English language, we say to use something. So yoga, whose root is yuj, I prefer to understand that in the English sense of use, or to have a use for something. People often call it like a yoke. That's fine. That is indeed one of the many meanings of the multivalent dhatu yuj. But often with yoke, it has the connotation of like planetary conjuncts. You can use the word yoga to describe the way planets interact with one another in Indian astrology. You can use that word to describe the way you would tie a boat to a dock or to a pier or something like that. The word is just a colloquial word, yoga. It just means union. It can be used to describe sex even. It just means like union. But I think the word use is very helpful here, because if yuj, and they're homonyms, right? Use, yuj. Use means, some technique, some upaya. And therefore the word yoga has been understood to be synonymous with the word tapasya, which in the Chandogya Upanishad is often used interchangeably with the word yoga. Tapasya means heating or glowing or some kind of purification or austerity or some kind of thing that brings you closer to power or to freedom. So if you take the word tapasya and if you take the word yoga, we understand them to mean the same thing. Some kind of useful method or technique that will grant you some kind of result. Typically that result though is defined as moksha. So that which gives you moksha is called yoga, and that which brings you worldly success is called karma. So now there's already a tension in the Vedic world between the word karma and the word yoga. So the question we have to ask then is, can karma be a yoga? Can you do rituals? And again, karma understood in that strict Vedic sense to mean only Vedic rituals. Can karma, Vedic ritualism, be a means for moksha? And the answer is resoundingly yes. The goal of karma is not necessarily just to secure pleasure and to secure wealth and to secure harmony in the here and in the hereafter. The goal of karma is also to attain moksha. So the claim is that there are 4 goals of life: dharma, artha and kama, as well as moksha, and Vedic rituals can grant you all 4 goals. That's the understanding that we get from the karma kanda of the Vedas. Okay, now it's going to get interesting. The Vedas can also be understood from a philosophical contemplative point of view. So there's a whole other section called the Jnana Kanda. Kanda means part, Jnana means knowledge. So as the Karma Kanda is the part on rituals and action, the Jnana Kanda is the part on knowledge and philosophy and inquiry and contemplative Gnostic knowledge. They're at odds with one another though, because the Karma Kanda talks about rituals. The Jnana Kanda seems to like almost talk down to rituals, suggesting that one doesn't need rituals or that rituals will never ultimately take one to moksha, that it's this insight, this deep intellectual and quasi-intellectual, more mystical discovery, revelation, that's what will give you moksha. So now it's almost like the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda are 2 separate sections, and Dharma, Artha, Kama, the goals of righteousness or morality, the goals of wealth and pleasure, they can all be relegated over to the Karma Kanda side, the ritualism side. And the goal of moksha, the goal of liberation, is co-opted by the Jnana Kanda side. So then you can understand all of this sequentially. You could say, all right, well, a person who is born into the Vedic community will first learn to do rituals, and through doing rituals they learn dharma, they become aligned with the forces of the universe. In other words, they learn to keep rita or rhythm, and by doing that they can grant themselves and their family and their community artha, meaning prestige, power, position, and above all wealth, and then through that they can enjoy kama, and that gives them the good life. Having enjoyed the good life, either for one lifetime or for several lifetimes, both here and in some celestial realm, they then come to thirst after this eternal life. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst, like that idea. It's like you don't have that instinct to seek out moksha until you've been satisfied to a great deal by this world and by the hereafter. So first you do the Karma Kanda, you get all that you want in this life and in the hereafter, and all of that is valid and totally like commendable. Like, it's good to actually try to get what you want and be happy and pursue your goals. But then after a while, you come to crave this moksha, and then the second part of the Vedas becomes important to you. The first part was only important and only relevant insofar as you wanted dharma, artha, and kama. That's one view of the Vedas. Once you stop wanting dharma, artha, and kama, in other words, once you start questing for this higher thing, higher only relative to the fact that you no longer want dharma, artha, and kama, once you start questing for it, then you take seriously the jnana kanda of the Vedas. And to be even more precise here, the karma kanda is composed of the brahmanas, the ritual manuals, and those brahmanas are themselves rooted in the stotras, like these hymns to various gods and goddesses. So the stotras and the brahmanas form the karma kanda, but then importantly the aranyakas and the upanishads are the selections within the Vedas. They're peppered all throughout the Vedas, but they're selections within the Vedas that deal with the meaning of rituals. So where the brahmanas will tell you what to do, the Aranyaka and the Upanishad especially will tell you why to do it. In fact, they'll even discourage you from doing it at certain points by saying that there's something even deeper that you could be doing with your time. So, if the Jnana Kanda is about moksha, and if the Karma Kanda is about dharma, artha, and kama, you can understand these four goals as being sequential. Without understanding dharma, you will never make artha. If you don't understand the laws of the cosmos, if you are not in rhythm with the whole and with the universe, if you don't know how to be in proper community and society with the invisible, immaterial beings all around you, you're fucked. No amount of wealth that you make, you'll be able to keep. You won't be able to actually make wealth. And even if through unethical means you somehow gain wealth, it won't be yours. It will be something that will eventually be taken away from you. You'll go to jail or something and you'll be fined. You have to pay high fees and whatnot. It's very hard to maintain a wealth that was unjustly acquired. That's why you can see with colonialism and capitalism, a lot of wealth that is generated through colonialism and capitalism is unjustly acquired. And therefore it's very hard to keep. Those empires that build their wealth through conquest, they often very quickly lose that wealth, especially once they get to the height of their empire. Very soon that empire starts to be dismantled from within. Some enemy kingdom will come and take all that wealth from them because it was unjustly acquired to begin with. Compared to India, which for centuries and thousands of years and millennia has not only acquired wealth but kept it quite well because of its dharmic practices. It's only when India forgets dharma that it's hard for India to keep wealth. And so Mongols have come, the British Empire have come, all of them have unjustly acquired their wealth through the rape and pillage of the land, and where are they now? And yet India remains there with a deeper wealth, we would argue, the wealth of this knowledge and this tradition. But arguably dharma is that which teaches you how to acquire wealth, and if acquired dharmically, that wealth is really yours. And more importantly, once you have that wealth, through dharma you can enjoy pleasure, and that pleasure will be really yours. You can't steal wealth or pleasure. You can only earn wealth and pleasure, and the way to do that is through dharma, which is supposed to be this trans-cultural, at least universal. If I can't use the word trans-cultural, at least I can use the word universal. In other words, it's not specific to the cultural context of Indians at that time, circa 3800 BCE. It's this universal, if not trans-cultural idea about the ultimate nature of reality, which if you are in alignment with, will grant real wealth and real pleasure. So all of that is sequential. First you must learn dharma, then you must acquire wealth, and then only you can enjoy pleasure. And notice, from this point of view, pleasure is the highest goal. Pleasure is the purpose of being in this world. We want to be happy. We move towards those things that pleasure us, that make us feel good. And we feel good when we make other people feel good. So a lot of our ethical intuitions are also rooted in the pleasure principle. If something makes someone happy and brings them pleasure, do that thing. And if something takes away someone's pleasure and makes them unhappy, don't do that thing. And similarly in your own life, if something brings you joy and pleasure, do that thing. And if something takes away your joy and pleasure, don't do that thing. Our very basic ethical assumptions are premised on this prima facie, a priori, precognitive, intuitive sense for what makes me happy and what makes me sad. In other words, what makes me pleasured and what brings me pain. So kama, pleasure, is understood here as the goal of life, and artha and dharma support kama. Do you see? So at no point does the Vedic tradition demonize pleasure, but it provides a very systematic way for attaining pleasure. And you'll see, the main point I want to make here is that it's ritualism, it's mantra, it's some kind of fire sacrifice that leads to pleasure. So the whole purpose of doing fire sacrifice is to live a good life, both here and in the hereafter. Now, arguably, if you understand this as a sequence, once you have dharma, then you have artha, then you have kama, then having had enough kama, having enjoyed this world to its fullest, having thoroughly enjoyed the celestial realms, once you have this past life memory of all the joy you've had here and in the hereafter, then you realize, okay, I think I'm good. It was fun. It was really fun, but now I think I want something maybe deeper, something, I don't say deeper, it's different, Then you become interested in this thing called moksha. So if you understand all of this sequentially, then you will finish with dharma, meaning you will finish with Vedic ritualism. Because from this point of view, dharma is just doing Vedic ceremonies, just doing Vedic rites. It's not just about like fulfilling your debt to your ancestors, fulfilling your debt to the rishis, fulfilling your debt to animals and bhutas, and fulfilling your debt to the gods, the devas. It's much more than that. To fulfill those debts, it's a lot more than just taking sugar and putting it outside for the ants to eat. It involves rituals. You have to know what rituals to perform, and more importantly, you have to participate in the state-sponsored program of the brahmanas performing the right rituals at the right time to maintain rita, to maintain the balance of the cosmos. That's what dharma looks like. But the only reason, like I just pointed out, for engaging with this whole system is for artha and kama. If you didn't want artha or kama, in other words, if you were finished with both wealth and pleasure, why would you care for dharma? In other words, why would you care for Vedic ritualism? Why would you care for society? And why would you care to participate in those structures upheld by society, which are primarily designed to sponsor dharma? Read also, sponsor Vedic ritualism. So a lot of times, a person who is interested in moksha might step away from dharma, artha, and kama, which is another way of saying they might step away from society at large. Because society is nothing but the dharmic attempt to acquire artha and guarantee kama for all of its denizens. Is that clear? So far, so good? It's important to understand these things, because you can see how things have changed over the years. And to understand Tantra, it's helpful to understand the Vedic worldview. Especially if you're not part of the Vedic world. Like if you're just now being introduced to yoga and to Sanatana Dharma and to Tantra and whatnot, it's easy to forget that all of this is rooted in a cultural trajectory that's been literally happening or playing itself out over millions and millions of years. And so understanding that cultural trajectory is crucial. And often I take it for granted. So it's nice to take a step back and explore the Vedic understanding of things and the various interpretations that we've had over the years. Now, when you look at something like the Birhad Aranyaka Upanishad, you'll see a character, Yagnavalkya, is a very special and important character in the Upanishadic world. He might have been India's first sadhu. In one sense, you could say. He's a famous character because he leaves his wife and children and leaves society and fucks off. Presumably to the jungles or to the Himalayas or something, in order to realize Brahman. And there's this beautiful conversation in the opening of the Birhad Aranyak Upanishad between Yagnavalkya and his wife. And he has two wives, and he's trying to divide property between his two wives. And he's talking to this one wife, Maitreyi, and she's like, bro, what the fuck? Why are you doing this? Why are you leaving everything behind and going into the mountains or whatever? And he tries to explain to her this quest called the quest for moksha. And he explains that, actually what we really want in life is not money, nor is it even pleasure. So he brings up the topic of sex, and he says, what do you really like in sex? He says, the husband loves the wife, or the wife loves the husband, not for the husband's sake or the wife's sake, but for the sake of the self. Now, you can understand this in many different ways. I like Swami Vivekananda's interpretation, because here he's saying it's not selfishness that Yagnavalkya means. He's saying there's something called the self, the Atman, Brahman. There's some reality, and that's what we actually want, but we articulate our quest through the quest for pleasure. So when we look for pleasure, what we're actually looking for is this thing called the Atman or Brahman, this truth. That's why we want pleasure, because actually we're trying to get at this thing. Then he says, what about wealth? The thing about money, the reason why we want money, he says, the rich man loves his wealth, not for the sake of the wealth, but for the sake of the self. That self is what you really want. You were looking for it through money, and you were looking for it through pleasure. Now I want to look for it in its own right. I am not able to find it through money or pleasure anymore. I'm just going to go leave all this behind and go into the Himalayas or whatever and sit in a cave and then try to articulate this quest in a different way. It's a beautiful conversation. And, there's a thought experiment in the Advaita Vedanta world to prove this point. Let's say you want money. Okay? That's your goal. You want some money. And then I say to you, I'm going to give you $1 million. But here's the caveat. You can never spend any of that money, nor can you tell anybody about it. So you have $1,000,000, but it's a secret. Only you know you have it. And it's also absolutely useless because you can't withdraw any of that money or spend it in any way, shape, or form. Would you still want that $1,000,000? Obviously not. I mean, maybe some people, but like, again, most people would be like, no, the whole point of having $1,000,000 is so I'll have more options in my life. So I'll be able to go on vacations and help my friends out and buy gifts for people. You know, so you ask them like, why do you want money? And they'll be like, oh, so that I can buy gifts for my friends. And then you say, okay, let's imagine now that I give you those gifts. You don't even need the money anymore. You wanted money to buy gifts for your friends. Okay, here you are. Here are all the gifts, but you're not allowed to give them to your friends. Would you still want those gifts? No, because the whole point of getting them is to give them to your friends. Why would you want them if you can't use them for what they were intended to be used for? So again, you don't actually want those gifts. You want your friends. And then you ask the question, well, I'll give you all these friends, but you will cease to exist. Would you want those friends? Often people will say no. Like, I want friends because they're my friends. If I'm not here, then they're not really my friends. And I want gifts because I want to give them to my friends. If I get gifts and I'm not allowed to give them, who cares about the gifts? And if I have money and I can never spend it, what's the point of money? So again, this is a thought experiment that you get in the Advaita Vedanta philosophical tradition to show that if you take any desire whatsoever, it's rooted in this self-reflexive, recursive sort of thing where it's like about the self ultimately. So you can understand that in terms of selfishness, but you can also understand it in a much deeper way. There's something deep within called the self that is blissful, that we do everything for. And that's articulated in the Birhad Upanishad, the very opening verse, a very opening conversation rather. So, you know, Yagnavalkya is understood to be this great sadhu, the first sadhu in India who stepped away from society in order to go and articulate this quest for moksha. So if you think of moksha as distinct from dharma, artha and kama, you now have two paths. You can see in the Katha Upanishad how those two paths are dichotomous. Because when Yamaraj presents those two paths to Nachiketa, Nachiketa says, the two paths are called Shreyas and Preyas, that which is pleasurable and that which is good. And the good is distinguished from the pleasurable, you see. And so if you want the good, you have to give up the pleasurable. And if you want the pleasurable, then you might have to give up the good. This is a kind of dichotomy that Yamaraj might be setting up for us in the Katha Upanishad. It's an Upanishadic, Vedic dichotomy almost. And so Nachiketa says, to the offer of like wealth and pleasure and all sorts of worldly success, he says, why would I want these things? These things tire out the senses. You know, another way of like reading that in the Sanskrit is like, I'm tired of them, he says. He's not saying, oh, I don't want them because I haven't enjoyed them, but through my wisdom I realize they're not that enjoyable. I think that's stupid. If you haven't enjoyed something, how do you know it's not enjoyable? There are a lot of people who are like, I don't want money, I don't want sex, I don't want the world, I don't care for pleasure. Hare, try some first. You know, because if you don't, then later when you're a big Baba and sitting on some kind of throne accepting donations from your students, that's when you will hanker after the world. Because you've never tried it. There's always going to be something within you that's like, I should try this. Yes, try it. It's fucking awesome, actually. Like, it's really fun. The world is really fun. And like, if you don't think so, it's just like, you're not going to the right parties, you're not hanging out with the right people. You know, like, you're just boring. Like, you're just like, you're writing off the world, but have you ever even like enjoyed it? Do you know, like, do you even know how to enjoy it? Like, that's what the Kama Sutra is for, and all of these things, the Artha Shastras, it's like all about how to get the most from this world. And we don't even understand that Shastra, that Dharma. And very quickly we buy into this kind of weird Hindu apologetics that tricks us into thinking the world ain't all that. Do you know? Do you know for sure? Are you just going to take other people's word for it? The Buddha might show up to your town and tell you, sex ain't all that. Hare, he was a prince, he had a harem. I'm a scruffy, poor villager in some small Indian town, circa 600 BCE. I'm like, oh, Buddha Dev, you're right. Sex ain't all that. Let me just become a monk. Hare, what do you think is going to happen to that boy? He doesn't know what he's giving up. And neither do you, neither do I. Very few of us understand what we're giving up. You see, so Nachiketa, he's a young boy. So we think, oh, he's so wise, he's so good. He looked at the world and he knew that it wasn't going to suffice and it wasn't going to fulfill him. So he said to Yamaraj, these things wear out the senses. I beg to differ. I appeal to reincarnation. I appeal to the fact that Nachiketa must have enjoyed all of this in a previous life, such that at age 9, he's not saying these things tire out the senses. He's saying I'm tired of them. Isn't that beautiful? It's a wholly different way to understand pleasure, because what this is saying is that the way out of pleasure is through, not through denial or rejection, but through life-affirming dharmic embrace, to try our best to ethically live out our goals and ambitions and pursue the things that we think will actually make us happy. And by doing that, we can, arguably, if we take this view seriously, the sequential view, we get to the place where you can say, I'm good, I've enjoyed this enough. And you only know when you're there. No one else can tell you. No one else can say, aren't you good? If you're, people are always like, aren't you bored of doing this? I'm like, I'm not. Like, I'm gonna continue. You can do what you want, but this is still fun for me. In other words, like, if something is fun for you, it only stops being fun for you when it stops being fun for you. No one else can come to that conclusion. You're on your own journey there. So Nachiketa, in his journey, has come to the conclusion, arguably, that he's tired of dharma, artha, kama. So when he's presented this by Yamaraj then says, oh, he's very impressed, and he's like, okay, fine, then I will teach you this secret, which is, liberating, this liberating insight, which at first Yamaraj didn't want to teach him. Anyway, I could go on a digression here for the next hour and explain how Nachiketa is able to acquire dharma, artha, and kama through jnana. This is interesting. He's not getting it through karma. He's not doing a ritual. He died, met the god of death, and then the god of death is willing to give him everything that he wants. So this means jnana can give you dharma, artha, and kama, which actually implies the reverse is also true. Karma can give you moksha. But I'm not going to get into all of that right now. There's just a cool thought that I'm going to put on the table. Eshama might like to think about it. Just some of you have been studying this a long time. Like, that's a really cool thought. I'll just put it there for a moment. But I'll come back to this topic though. So Yamaraj is presenting Nachiketa with what seems to be a dichotomy. So Nachiketa might say, okay, I could go down this path and get dharma, artha, and kama, or I could go down this other path and get that which is not pleasurable but good, which is ultimately pleasurable. And Nachiketa makes that choice, and Yamaraj seems to celebrate him for it. Yamaraj says, it was a wise choice that you made. Fools chase pleasure, thinking that is the good, but wise people give up pleasure in pursuit of the good, because that's actually good. That's actually going to be truly pleasurable. So then Nachiketa learns this liberating insight, and he acquires moksha, and he's happy ever after. The atyantika dukkha nivritti, paramananda prapti. That's what he attains. And he learns all about the Atman, and also he learns meditation techniques in order to realize the Atman. He learns that the Atman, meditatively speaking, is like the size of a thumb, angushta matram, and it's in the heart, and he's told to meditate in the heart and identify with the Atman. Blessed is he who hears about it, so much more blessed is he who understands it, and the most blessed is he who realizes it. All of that is in the Katha Upanishad. So these Upanishads and also these Aranyakas are teaching about Brahman, about Atman, about the self. And often the context for acquiring this knowledge is leaving behind worldly knowledge, which gives us this beautiful dichotomy between aparavidya and paravidya. Things like the Kama Sutra or any Artha Shastra, like wealth building manual, all of these things, and including all the dharmic text of the Vedas, all of these things are considered aparavidya. What do you say? Immanent knowledge, or worldly knowledge, or secular knowledge. Then there's paravidya, which means higher knowledge or spiritual knowledge. And they seem to be a dichotomy. If you pursue aparavidya, you're going to give up paravidya. And if you pursue paravidya, it's going to require that you walk away from aparavidya, like Yagnavalkya, like Nachiketas. So Shankara, the great interpreter of the 9th century, he revives the Vedic tradition in the predominantly Buddhist India at that time. And he interprets the Vedas, and he presents these two sections, and he says the Jnana Kanda is better. So Shankara unabashedly will defend the Jnana Kanda as being uniquely conducive to liberation. And he gives this argument. He presents the issue as one of ignorance. He says, you don't know what you are. He calls this avidya. You don't know what you are, you don't know what God is, and you don't know what the world is. You don't understand the reality of things. So, in your ignorance, you project onto yourself and onto the world and onto God these limiting adjuncts called upadis. In other words, you think you are this person with this memory and with this intellect and with this mind. You think you are this person with this body. That's a mistake. You think the world is variegated. You think the chair is different from the table, and the table is different from the hippopotamus, and the hippopotamus is different from Kalidasi. Like, you make all of these distinctions in the world that is presented to you. And then you say there's this God, and you fight over it. You say, oh, it's Krishna, and someone says it's Kali, and someone says it's Jesus, and you all kill yourselves over which God is right, because you think somehow whoever wins the war is favored by their God, I don't know, I feel like the people who died in the war are favored, because whichever God is real would probably want their people to die to, like, get them out of this stupid fucking world, So I think it's the opposite. It's like, oh, we won the war, our God obviously supports us, oh, we are the colonial power, our God must be right. No, hare, it's the opposite. If you killed me, then my God must love me more, because at least I don't have to stick around in this stupid world and deal with your stupid face. I'd rather be out of here. It's like, I don't know, these are the stupidities of religion. We kill each other over which name of God is correct. And so what Shankara is saying is this is all just like nonsense. Like the idea of God is nonsense. The idea of the world is nonsense. The idea of the self is nonsense. And yet we experience the world, we experience ourselves, and we experience quote unquote God. It's all a hallucination. Just like when you see a rope and you mistake it for a snake, just like that, you're seeing reality, but because you don't know reality, because you're in ignorance, you project onto reality the unreal. You see it for something that it's not. You're making a mistake. This is called adhyasa, or adhyaropa, or otherwise just known as avidya, just basic ignorance. So ignorance is the problem according to Shankara, yes? And because of ignorance, this leads to kama. So desire, I want things because I don't know what I am. I don't know what the world is. And because I'm seeing a world of many things, there are things that I fear and things that I like. And so I move towards the things that I like. I move away from the things that I fear. All because I don't understand that I cannot be harmed. Or I don't understand that I am actually fulfilled in and of myself. I don't know my own fullness. So like a beggar with begging bowl in hand, I go searching for it everywhere, except in the one place where it can be found, within. It's like, Karen, have you tried speaking to the manager within? It's like that meme. It's like we don't look within because, we're presented with this external world, which we take very seriously. Avidya is the cause for kama, desire, and kama is the cause for karma, action. So when I act in the world, whether it's Vedic ritualism or any other action implied by the word karma, it's because I'm impelled by either fear or desire. I want something or I don't want something. It's two ways of saying the same thing, kama, and therefore I act. And if I act, I incur karma. Karma here means, like, when my action is enacted, I must be around to receive the necessary reaction. It's like a Newtonian principle. Every action has its equal and opposite reaction, so that's karma. Karma here is understood both as the action and as the necessary reaction, which completes the karma. Now, if I engage in karma, then if I lose my body, I must take a new body in order to be the recipient of the second part of that action, which is the reaction. This is called punarjanma. So this wheel of birth, death, and rebirth is powered by desire. Trishna, thirst, as the Buddha would say it. And that kama, that trishna, which leads to karma, which leads to punarjanma, all of that is rooted in avidya, ignorance. Now follow this logic very closely. It's Shankara's brilliant argument which sets the Jnana Kanda apart from the Karma Kanda and privileges the philosophical, inquiry-oriented, contemplative techniques of the Jnana Kanda over the Karma Kanda. Here's how he does it. He says, if ignorance is the problem, it can be likened to darkness. Darkness is a really great metaphor for ignorance. I don't see the rope because in the darkness, I'm seeing instead a snake. I'm projecting a snake because I don't see clearly that it's a rope. What is the opposite to darkness? It's light. It's not like I can go into a dark cave and just make noise and expect to see. Because sound is not the opposite of darkness. Unless you're like a bat or something. I can't go into a dark room and be like, ah! And like expect to echolocate. I don't have that function. I can sing, I can clap my hands, I can make myself feel better, but that's not going to show me what's in the room. I'm never going to use sound to reveal the objects of the room. I need light. Light is the opposite of darkness. So in that same way, what's the opposite of ignorance? Knowledge, right? Knowledge is the opposite of ignorance. Because knowledge is the opposite of ignorance, only knowledge can remove ignorance. Just like only light can remove darkness, given that light is the opposite of darkness. It's a very important philosophical point. Sound is not the opposite of darkness, so sound cannot remove darkness. Light is the opposite of darkness, so light can remove darkness. Now, if knowledge is the opposite of avidya, and if avidya, according to Sri Shankara, is the problem, only knowledge will free you. Only jnana will free you. No amount of rituals that you could possibly perform, no amount of bhakti, no amount of arguably even meditation will ever free you. Because all of these things are still within Maya. They're still about the body and about the mind. How many hatha yoga poses can you do until you're free? In other words, how much water does the mirage need to have to wet the desert sands? That's literally the way Shankara phrases it. He says, any kind of practice you do on the level of the body and mind, if you think it's going to save you, it's like thinking that the mirage is going to wet the desert sands. It's not going to, because it exists on a wholly other order of reality, which Shankara dismisses as illusory. And the philosophical reasoning is obvious. Because knowledge is the opposite of ignorance, it is only those knowledge portions of the Vedas that give you knowledge that will free you, not the action portion of the Vedas. Ritualism, the act of performing karma yoga, ritual action, like that's not at all going to be spiritual nourishing. flourishing. At best, it's going to give you success in the here and in the hereafter. It's worldly. Vedic rituals are apara vidya, lower knowledge or worldly knowledge or secular knowledge. And yes, they work. Vedic rituals work. Shankara is not denying that if you perform Vedic rituals correctly, you will enter into the flow of the universe. You'll be part of Rita. You'll be in the rhythm of the cosmos, and that will bring in huge amounts of wealth, and wealth that's sustainable. And through that wealth, you can enjoy pleasure and power and prestige, and you live a great life. Not just right now, but even after you'll die. Even after you die, you'll be able to go to Gandharva Loka or Apsara Loka, and there you'll have a ball. It's the best rave ever. But who cares? All of that is illusory. That will never really satisfy you. What you want is this thing which Sri Krishna says is the greatest possible thing you can attain. Having attained which nothing higher is left to be attained. Having attained which not even the heaviest sorrows can shake you. Na dukena guru napi vichalyate. This is that thing which grants you categorical release from all suffering. Nirvana, atyantika dukkha nivritti. It gives you the supreme bliss, paramananda prapti, which everything else is only reminiscent of. Shankara says all the pleasures of the world combined is like an ocean spray arising from the ocean of your being, which is bliss in and of itself. It's not even blissful, it's bliss in and of itself. It's meaning in and of itself. It's sara. It's sarada. It's the essence, that which gives meaning and that which gives essence. And according to Yagnavalkya and the Aranyak, this is what you actually want, actually. You want this, and yet your quest has taken you to pleasure, and taken you to money, and taken you to relationships, but you've actually only ever wanted this. So Shankara says, like the Buddha before him, give up relationships, give up jobs, give up acquiring wealth, give up participating in the world, and like a beggar with begging bowl in hand, walking here and there looking for a little bit of pleasure where you can eke it out. Give all of these things up and focus on the quest for moksha. What does that look like though? Not performing rituals. Because the purpose of rituals is arguably to attain dharma, artha, and kama. That's not what Shankara wants you to do. Instead, he says, at a certain point, you have to give all of these up, and you have to learn. But what do you learn? The Jnana Kanda. In other words, the Upanishads. You study the Upanishads. And through a proper detailed study of the Upanishads, involving commentaries and involving debates and involving like back and forth arguments, this is called manana, through a proper concerted effort, through intellectually inquiring and intuitively and mystically perceiving through the Upanishads, you then, through Shravana, Manana, and ultimately Nidhyasana, which means integrating what you're contemplating, first you hear the Upanishads, then you think about the Upanishads, then you, through thinking and hearing, you then internalize. And then that is called liberation, moksha. Because only light can remove darkness, only jnana can remove avidya. So who cares about the karma kanda, you see? Screw it. Nobody cares about rituals anymore. Why? What, you have to get a horse now? You have to go and get some horses and sacrifice them in the Ashwamedha sacrifice? Cool it, Yudhishthira. You're not trying to like lead a kingdom anymore. You're just some bloke with a tech job in Delhi. Like, you're not going to perform the Ashwamedha sacrifice. Give it up. Instead, take my course, my Taittiriya Upanishad course, or something like that's the new Hinduism. And it's tremendously influenced by Shankara's claim here that the karma kanda is fine, it's just not that important. I'll give you another important example. There's a debate between Adi Shankaracharya and Mandana Mishra. Mandana Mishra is the best representation for the Vedic karma kanda. You can see he's the student of Kumarila Bhatta, one of the great Purva Mimamsaka masters. In other words, he's the best representative. He's the incarnation, if ever there was one, for Vedic ritualism. And he's a householder. He has a wife, probably more than one. He has a big house. He has all this wealth. He has all this pleasure. And he's very learned. He knows all about the karma kanda. He knows all about the rituals. And all he does is perform fire ceremony. There's this wonderful story that's told in the legends, the Digvijaya, the autobiography on Shankara. No, sorry, it's not the autobiography. It's the biography on Shankara. I think there is an autobiography on Shankara. It's called the Dakshinamurti Stotram. If indeed he wrote it, it seems quite autobiographical. Anyway, that aside, the legend is Shankara breaks into this guy's house. Like, Shankara jumps over the fence. He's told by Kumarila Bhatta. I've told you the story in a different lecture. I don't really want to get into it now. I have other things to get into. But he's told by Kumarila Bhatta, who is in the middle of self-immolating at that time, to go and see Mandana Mishra. And Kumarila tells him, go to the house in Mithila. This is an ancient kingdom of learning. And in this kingdom, you'll find a house where the parrots are reciting the Vedas. There you'll find Mandana Mishra. In other words, Mandana Mishra is just reciting the Vedas so much that even his parrots have learnt the Vedas. That's the extent of his knowledge. So, Shankara allegedly finds such a house. He jumps the fence, and there's this beautiful exchange between them involving puns on the word sura or karana, wine. Because Shankara as a Shaiva is being accused of drinking wine. It's a remarkable thing, especially for those of you studying Kaulachara and Vāmācāra. One of Shankara's disciples was a Kapalika, who in one place almost killed him, sacrificed him. It's really interesting. There's a whole leela to this whole Shankara thing. But anyway, Shankara breaks into the house. he's engaged in this witty, punny kind of exchange with Mandana Mishra, and eventually he gets Mandana Mishra to debate with him. The stakes are very high. If Shankara loses, Shankara has to get married, and he has to become a householder and participate in the dharmic structure of Vedic society and acquire wealth and pursue pleasure, as per the Karma Kanda. But if Mandana Mishra wins, then but if Shankara wins, then Mandana Mishra will have to give up his wife, give up his house, leave all pleasure and wealth behind, and like follow Shankara out into the deserts, out into the jungles, out into the caves of the Himalayas in order to like live as a monk and do that dharma instead. So it's a historic moment in India. Literally the outcome of this debate would change the course of history. If Mandana Mishra won, it would be a very different Hinduism that we're talking about today. A Hinduism that I am actually representing. So just so you know, I'm on Mandana Mishra's side on this debate in one sense. Shankara did win though. Right? And so that's important because that happened. Shankara allegedly won. Mandana Mishra became Shankara's disciple. But the Tāntrik tradition is so interesting. It's going to try to reconcile these two things. Now, why am I leaning towards Mandana Mishra? Because we're leaning very hard towards Buddha and towards Sri Shankara. And in so doing, we're losing some of that life-affirming, like Vedic Rishi orientation. Going all the way the other direction is not it either. These are dichotomies that hopefully in the course of today's lecture we can try to reconcile. I haven't even started with the Tantric stuff. All of this is just preamble. I hope you don't mind. I'm just warming up. Coming back to this though, Mandana Mishra, if he won, it would have changed things for dramatically for the next thousands or so of years. We'd be having a very different conversation now. I'd probably be representing Shankara right now if Mandana Mishra won. But Shankara won. So therefore I'm like about to make a claim on Mandana's side. Shankara won, and so Mandana literally gave up his wife. By the way, the judge of the debate was his wife. That's interesting. They say Lakshmi or Sarada incarnate was Mandana Mishra's wife, and Mandana Mishra's wife herself said Shankara won. And there's this weird side quest that Shankara goes on where he possesses the body of a king in order to learn like Kama Sutra, because without knowledge of sex he can't beat Mandana Mishra because his knowledge is not yet complete. But as a 16-year-old virgin, what does he know about sex? So he then like astral projects into the body of a king, and it's just like a whole thing. There's like a very interesting kind of dynamic here. But anyway, Shankara wins. Mandana Mishra leaves his wife and family and children behind and follows Sri Shankara and becomes one of his most important disciples actually. The word Mandana means to build up. Is that interesting? One who builds. And so the Karma Kanda, the Vedic like ritual section, is about building. It's about growing and constructing. In other words, reifying the sense of self in the world that you take to be real. So this Kanda is often very realist. It sees the world as real, and it sees your efforts in the world to build a better life as really good. It affirms the reality of the world, and it affirms the meaning of your individual engagement with this real world. Whereas Shankara, his interpretation of the Upanishads and the Aranyakas leans towards a sort of idealism that sees the world as a dream, as illusory, that sees the self as illusory, and that frames all individual self-oriented activities in the world as meaningless. Not just meaningless, but ignorant. So you have to be misaligned with the truth in order to like have a family and to have children and to like go out into the world. So what you end up getting in India today and all over the world is very much like what you end up getting in the first 300 years of Christianity. After the Christ left his body and after his resurrection and everything, there's this big debate as to like what Christianity should look like. And the, clerics of the Roman Catholic world, arguably in a bid to consolidate power, created a schism between the clerical community and the laity. So here we have the bishops. Under the bishops we have priests, and under the priests we have deacons, and all of them are clerics, meaning monks, and they're considered to have more spiritual authority than the laity, which are householders, people like you and me in the cities who are working at shops and transacting with one another and like just trying to live a good life. The monks, the clerics, they also make money, but they're considered holy. Whereas the householders who make money are considered worldly. Isn't that interesting? Sometimes we find the worldliest people wear the robes of a cleric, and the holiest, saintliest, simplest people are people who are wearing the smock of the laity. So the schism between cleric and laity is largely, in the Christian world, a construct based on the reification of the church and the consolidation of power. The same thing happens in India, where we start thinking that moksha is higher than dharma, kama, and artha. This is very dangerous because people who actually want dharma, kama, and artha are guilted into wanting moksha. They trick themselves into thinking that's the goal of life, and other people convince them that's the goal of life, and they think there's a certain prestige in giving the world up and pursuing that life. But while they've given the world up, the world hasn't given them up. So it's facetious. It's someone who wants one thing, but then is tricked by their society and by themselves into thinking they ought to want another thing. They're presented with this false dichotomy, I'm going to argue, between Shreyas and Preyas. They think what it is to pursue the good is to give up the pleasurable. And often this is premature. Think of Ashoka, King Ashoka, who was forcibly conscripting young boys into Buddhist monasteries in his zeal for spreading Buddhism over India, and in Buddhism's zeal for reifying monasticism as better than the laity. What you end up finding in such cases is forced conscriptions into monasteries. That's a historical fact. Ashoka would demand that one young boy from every family be forcibly sent at a young age to a monastery. What does that boy know of the world? And yet he's forcibly asked to renounce it? You can clearly see what's going to happen. What do you think is going to happen when a Catholic bishop is forced to swear off sex and money? He's going to illicitly acquire those things. And that's exactly what happens all over the world behind closed doors. Not just behind the closed doors of churches, behind the closed doors of ashrams. That's why Mātangī and the Mahavidyas are so important. They kick down those doors. They pour a dark light into all of this and they say, look, you two are dogs. The only difference is that you're dogs in fancy hats. Now come to the smashan and be what you are. Be dogs, be naked, be free. That will be more wholesome. Anyway, putting all of that aside for a moment. The schism between the clerics and the laity, which we see in the Christian world, is a schism that is also reified in the Hindu world, insofar as you have narratives that privilege moksha as higher or better or more noble than dharma, kama, and artha. And that's not at all the Vedic worldview. It's all of these things are either non-hierarchically valid or sequentially valid. By the way, if they are sequentially valid, you cannot say that what comes later in the sequence is more important than what comes earlier in the sequence. This is also a weird hierarchicalization of sequence. Think about it this way. All four are valid, right? But even if you present them as a sequence of one leading to another, you can't say moksha is the best, because without dharma, you wouldn't have artha. Without artha, you wouldn't have kama. And without kama, you wouldn't even know to want moksha. To pursue moksha without getting artha and kama is unsustainable and unlikely. So the only time you're going to have an actual, honest and earnest quest for moksha is when you've had enough artha and kama. And the only time you're going to have enough artha and kama is when you acquire those things through just dharmic means aligned with the total rhythm of the universe. So which one is more important? If I say the statement, I see a pot, is the word pot more important than I or see? No, I see a pot. All these four words, I see a pot, are all required in that sequence in order to make the sentence. So you can't say moksha is better than dharma, artha, or kama. They're all required, you see. But that's more or less what ends up happening. Historically, just the narrative around moksha has become one that privileges moksha as better. And so someone who's pursuing moksha is seen as better than someone who's pursuing dharma, artha, and kama. That's a tragedy, you guys. It's a tragedy, because if indeed moksha is seen as better, then a lot of people who don't actually want moksha, don't even understand what it is, they who otherwise would be perfectly content pursuing dharma, artha, and kama, are instead dissuaded from living an honest, sincere life, and they live a life that's not theirs, and vice versa. So arguably what's ended up happening is we privilege monastics over householders, and that's not fair to monastics either. It puts a lot of pressure on them. We're all alike, all human beings. It's that dog in us. We're all dogs. The only difference is, will you eat out of the same bowl or not? At least if you're eating out of the same bowl as a dog, it's a gesture of recognizing what you are. And that's why we do it. But if you think you're a man and stand up tall and wear special clothes, it's a tragic thing, because you're denying your own humanity, your own pashutva, your animal nature. And that's what we do to our monks by putting them on pedestals. It's a terrible place to be if you're wearing a special kind of cloth and everyone thinks you're better than them. All the householders go to any Vedanta temple. You should give them whips. I think you should give householders whips. And then they'll go to the temple and whip themselves. I'm so bad. I'm so worldly. I'm just trying to make money. But oh, Swami, you're so great. Swami, bless me so I can get a better promotion at Google. Hooray. That person has the same psychological issues as you. And the difference is that you're suffering at home. They're suffering out in the streets. Both of you are equally fucked. And both of you are equally valid in your quest. But the problem is, if you have higher and lower, privileging moksha over dharma, kama, and artha, what ends up happening ultimately is that, if you conceive of jnana-oriented practices as being uniquely conducive of moksha, also what ends up happening is the decline in Vedic ritualism. You see, like, rituals become less important. Kriya, actions become less important. And jnana, contemplative techniques like inquiry becomes more important. So if you're doing rituals, you're considered less than. If you're studying the Upanishads, you're considered better than. This is also very dangerous, because what ends up happening is people study the Upanishads, like I was saying last week, who have a lot of knowledge, but who don't seem to be able to integrate that knowledge. In other words, that knowledge doesn't shine forth in their lives. They just have it intellectually. So India is full of people all over the world. What to say of India, but all over the world. We have people who are great Vedic scholars, but they don't seem to have Brahma Veda Brahmaiva Bhavati. That promise doesn't seem to be fulfilled. One who knows Brahman becomes Brahman. Brahma Veda Brahmaiva Bhavati. But many people know Brahman enough to at least give university level college lectures on it. But like, are they Brahman? In other words, are they free, categorically free from all forms of suffering? Have they attained that ultimate bliss? Nobody can judge. Only we can judge. And if we're going to be honest, many of us who Brahma Veda, who are Brahma Vids, who are knowers of Brahman, we know jack shit because we're not happy. Like, there's not yet that atyantika dukkha nivritti or paramananda prapti, as much as we like to posture as being happy and being free. So if that's the case, something is missing. And what we're saying is that the kriya is a kind of jnana and the jnana is a kind of kriya. So to reconcile jnana and kriya was the purpose of that Denver lecture that we gave a long time ago, 2 weeks ago at least. And I'm trying to show how in the Tāntrik world, that same kind of Vedic tension that we find between the jnana kanda and the karma kanda is again reified, reasserted. And this is why the Tāntrik tradition is a renaissance of Vedic culture. That's how we understand it. Like, Lord Shiva recognizes the decline of Vedic knowledge in the Kali Yuga, and therefore he takes the Karuna-avatara. This is the story that Abhinavagupta and Shema Raja and others tell. He takes on this Karuna-avatara. It's called Sri Kanta, and Sri Kanta, the auspicious throated one, teaches Durvasas. In one version of the story, it's just Durvasas. In another version of the story, it's like these three sages. There's Amardaka, there's Srinatha, and there's Triambaka. In yet another version of the story, there are four. Triambaka has a daughter named Ardha Triambaka, to whom the Kaula teachings are given. Whatever the case may be, though, Lord Shiva takes an incarnation, a Karuna-avatara, and with his 5 faces, Ishana, Tatpurusha, all the faces, like the Urdhva Vaktara, the upward face is Ishana, the eastward facing face is Tatpurusha, southward facing face is called the Aghora face, the westward facing face is the Sadyojata face, northward facing face is the Vāmadeva face. With all these faces, Pancha Vaktrebhya Agamavat, Agamat Pancha Vaktrebhya. Where's the verse? What is the definition of Tantra? The verse is not coming to me now. That which is revealed by the 5 faces of Shiva is called the Tantra or the Agama. There's like a particular verse that I'm trying to remember. I forgot. But anyway, so the Tantras or Agamas, I'm using the word interchangeably, is the revelation of Lord Shiva. But what kind of revelation is it? It's the revelation of the Vedas. It's a re-revelation. A revelation. It's a representation of the Vedic knowledge more suited to the Kali Yuga. So there's nothing in the Tantras that isn't there in the Vedas. That's our claim. Just like Abhinavagupta says, there's nothing in my Malini Vijaya Uttara Tantra there's nothing in my Tantra Loka that is not found in the Malini Vijaya Uttara Tantra, except when you read the Tantra Loka, you're like, bro, there's like a lot in here that I would never have thought to found. I would have never myself found in the Malini Vijaya Uttara Tantra. He's like bringing in Kali from the Jayadatta Yamala Tantra, and he's substituting Mātangī with Kali and integrating the Krama traditions, and he's doing like all sorts of crazy, like intellectually brilliant things. And the whole time he's saying, there's nothing in my Tantra Loka that isn't there in the Malini Vijaya Uttara Tantra. Similarly, when you look at the Tantra, you're like, this does not look Vedic at all. What is Aim? What is Kleem? Like, none of these are Vedic mantras. Like, I mean, you can try. You can be Bhaskara Raya or Lakshmidhara, and you can try to say, oh, in the Atharva Veda, you get these Sri Vidya mantras. But you guys, it's a stretch. Like, when you actually read Lakshmidhara and Bhaskara Raya, you see that these are court brahmanas trying their absolute damnedest to make these Shakta, orgiastic tribal traditions look Vedic. It's a fucking stretch, you guys. Like, they're working really hard. Bhavana Upanishad. Yeah, you think just by calling it an Upanishad, you somehow make the Shakta tradition more like the Vedic tradition? Like, but it's a noble effort. Like what Lakshmidhara and Bhaskara Raya are doing in the Krishna Deva Raya empire. It's like a noble effort because they're trying to bring together 2 different traditions. They're trying to bring the Tāntrik tradition back into the Vedic fold, having recognized some of the tensions between the worldview of these various traditions, especially post-Shankara, Anyway, there are a lot of historical, sociological, and cultural factors here that I just want to hint at before we can even get into tonight's lecture. It's just like all context to understand why this is the subtlest and most nuanced of conversations we could possibly have. And I can't tell you how many people outside of this culture have been in my living room who have been screaming at my face based on one or another kind of presentation of the Tantra. But it's just like, I'm like, you guys, like, chill. There's like at least 9,000 years of history, culture, and philosophy I have to catch you up on. First, sit down, let's learn Sanskrit. In fact, I'm teaching you a text, but let's just go back to being 4. You know, like, I know you're 28, but let's go back to being 4 and let's just learn Vyakarana. Repeat after me. I'm like, fucking sit down and learn. Like, read a book. Because it's like, what you're trying to talk about now requires a level of expertise and cultural context that we just don't provide anymore. And that I, unfortunately, just take for granted. I just, like, take for granted that everybody just has in their blood this Vedic background. But the fact is, we don't, and this needs to be taught. And so, it's hard work. It's hard work understanding all of these various cultural forces. It's a lot to keep track of, but it's important. So bear with me while I provide some preamble, some context for why these tensions are so important, so historically significant, and so personally meaningful. Because all of this ultimately is going to, like, culminate in what you do in your practice and how you understand your own practice. Okay, good. So I know it's a lot, but let's come back to this idea then of the Bhaskaraya Lakshmidhara attempt to bring the Tantric tradition back into the Vedic fold. It's almost as if in Abhinavagupta the same effort is done when he presents this worldview of, like, Sri Kanta is the incarnation of Lord Shiva meant to represent the Vedas. Like, you'll find that in the Tantric understanding, we don't consider ourselves to be Avaidika. We feel ourselves to be actually as Vedic as Vedas can be. But the Vedic tradition sometimes, especially in the urban Brahmanical movements, like Alexis Sanderson Ji has great articles on this, like the Kashmiri Brahmanas, purity versus power amongst Kashmiri Brahmanas or something. It's an academic article that Professor Alexis Sanderson at Oxford, right, put out. And it's a good article because it shows you how there are urban movements of Brahmanas in the Purva Mimamsaka tradition that reject the Tantric traditions as Avaidika, non-Vedic. Their mantras are not Vedic, their sexual habits are non-Vedic, their meat eating is non-Vedic, their wine consumption is not Vedic, etc., etc. They're worshipping yonis, for crying out loud. What the fuck is that? Except when you look at the Vedas, you have all this Vishnu yoni Garbha mantras and arguably, like, when you look at the Tantras, when they talk about yoni worship and when they're purifying Panchamakaras, they use almost exclusively Vedic mantras. Never mind the fact that the Tantras represent huge swaths of Vedic mantras. Like, you find huge sections of the Krishna Yajurveda in the Mrigendra Agama, for instance. You find all these Vedic mantras in the puja vidhis or ritual manuals of the Tantric tradition. Like, it's obviously, like, mixed up more than people want to think that it is. But when you ask the Tantrics, like Abhinavagupta and Shema Raja, what their Tantras are, they'll say, the Tantras are the revelation of the 5 faces of Lord Shiva. What is it a revelation of? Nothing but the Vedas. Just like there is nothing in Tantra Loka that isn't in the Mātangī Devī Tantra, there's nothing in the Tantras that aren't in the Vedas. The difference, though, is that when you look at it, I think anybody who studied the Tantra Loka and the Mātangī Devī Tantra, I think would really appreciate this analogy, because you'll find that in the Mātangī Devī Tantra, it's like kind of basic compared to the Tantra Loka. The Tantra Loka of Abhinavagupta is like, what? Like, I never would even have made those connections. This is so cool. Like, I now know what to do. But he's saying it's just the Mātangī Devī Tantra. So if you've studied those two texts, you can understand, like, what I mean when I say the Tantras are just the Vedas. When you look at the Vedas, you're like, this is awesome. But then when you look at the Tantras, you're like, what? This is so cool. Philosophically practice-oriented. But just like the Tantra Sar to the Mātangī Devī analog, the Tantras themselves are not really presenting anything that isn't there in the Vedas. They're just applying it. They're just kind of updating it or representing it in a way that we in the Kali Yuga can understand. So that's the understanding that we get from within Tantra about how Tantras relate to the Vedas. That might not be a shared understanding. The people in the Vedic side who aren't Tantrikas, and arguably that's impossible these days because they're too mixed up, but they might say, oh, Tantra's bad. I told you once, I was about to give a talk in San Diego at the Vedanta Society there, and the retreat was called Introduction to Tantra in the Light of Sri Ramakrishna. Now, I'm in the parking lot of the Hollywood Vedanta Temple, and we're all talking about this retreat, and someone's introducing me to some uncle or something who is like a donor or some respected person in the temple board or whatever. So they're like, oh, please meet this guy. He's going to give a retreat next week in San Diego. Just, like, meet him or whatever. And then the guy asked me, like, oh, so what's your topic? And I told him. And his jaw dropped and he was like, Tantra? Ramakrishna? How dare you accuse Ramakrishna of practicing Tantra? Then my jaw dropped. I was like, you're Bengali. Like, what the fuck? Like, are you smoking meth? And if so, like, fucking share. Because, like, what the fuck? Like, what? Like, I just couldn't believe it. But now I understand. The word Tantra has, of course, connotations to some people. I grew up a Tāntrik. My household was a Tāntrik household. I had Sri Chakras and Sri Yantras everywhere and lingams. I watched my grandfather pour a white liquid on top of a phallic image set into a yoni. Like, I'm a bit desensitized to this, you know. As a fish takes to water, I took to Tantra. But then I meet Indians who have been Abrahamized, and I meet actual members of the Abrahamic fold, and then now I realize like how fucking crazy edgy our stuff is in front of them. Indians also, because they just didn't grow up in that setting, you know. So Tantra is very scary to them. The female body is scary to them. Their own body is scary to them. Pleasure is scary to them. They're just like fucked for so many levels arguably because of Mongols, because of the colonized efforts, and because of the, you know, various like regressive cultural ideas that we have. Be that as it may though, Tantra, when understood outside of Tantra, can seem avaidika, non-Vedic, or dangerous, or heretical, right? But within Tantra, we don't see the Vedas as a problem. We actually say we are the Vedas. Like, what we're presenting is exactly what's there in the Vedas. So notice, the same issues that you expect to find in the Vedas, like that dichotomy I just pointed out between the Jnana Kanda, the Upanishadic Aranyaka kind of philosophical part, and the Karma Kanda, the ritualistic part, that same tension you're going to find reproduced in the Tantras. And that was this whole spiel for the last hour or so is the backdrop of our conversation in Denver. I didn't talk about it in Denver. I just like went right into the issue. But this is the backdrop. You'll see the Vedic tension between the Jnana Kanda and the Karma Kanda, which is exacerbated by Advaita Vedanta and by classical Buddhism, which prioritizes the Jnana Kanda and deprioritizes the Karma Kanda. And the success of classical Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta over the past however many hundreds of years, that's affected also how we approach Tantra. So Tantra, I would argue, is an attempt to balance the scale. We put way more emphasis on rituals. So if you take the Tantric transmission as a whole, most of the Tantras are going to be about rituals, external rituals, like literal physical rituals that you do at a certain time in a certain way with a certain group of people for a certain deity typically. So between the Tantric period and the Vedic period is something called the Puranic period. That's very important. I'm not going to get into it now. But between the years like 1000 BCE and 600 BCE, you learn a lot about deities like Shiva and Vishnu. At this point, they now have entire like cults of worship around them. So Tantra is going to be understood through a Puranic lens, but more or less, if you just put that aside for now, it's a ritual technology. So deities aside, whether it's Shiva or Vishnu, all that aside, it's just what you're doing in the Tantric world is typically going to be ritualistic and ceremonial. Do you see now how this is sort of like a course correction for the Shankarite kind of Advaita Vedanta or the Buddhistic classical Vedanta, classical Buddhism, like move away from rituals? So we moved away towards the Jnana Kanda, and we saw that wasn't really like doing it for us, and so we're taking a hard left by introducing all this like Vedic ritual revivalism. So if you think of Tantra as a cultural movement, philosophical spiritual revolution, it's really a kind of Vedic revivalism, and specifically the revivalism of the Karma Kanda. The role of ritual becomes so much more important. So if you think about your time here in this space and all the things that you've learned here, you'll see mostly the people who are in this community, their practice looks like daily puja. Mostly what people are doing in this space in our community is puja. And if you're not doing puja, the question is, are you even practicing Tantra? Because Tantra is understood above all as a ritualistic ceremonial approach to spiritual life. But again, all of that was there also in the Vedic period as the Karma Kanda. So now the question becomes, can it be a yoga? The same question, like karma will give you bhoga, and the Tantras again are not opposed to bhoga. Buddhism was, and Shankara's Kevala Advaita was. So much so that Shankara is afraid of Isha Upanishad verse 1. Do you remember Aurobindo's joke? Sri Aurobindo said God laughed 3 times. 1, when Shankara marched all over India actively preaching in action. 2, when Shankara performed his mother's funeral. Those of you who understand the Shankara Dashnami will see why that's really funny. And thirdly, when Shankara wrote the commentary to the Isha Upanishad. Because any Sanskrit scholars in the room will see like, dude, that was a stretch. To take the word bunjita and not read it as enjoy and instead read it as protect and be like, wait, what's the noun to which that protect word agrees with? It's not in the verse, and he says, oh, it's implied, it's the Atman. One should protect the Atman by renouncing the world. When tena tyaktena bunjita just obviously directly means renounce the world, enjoy the world. Shankara is so afraid of the word bunjita because it means bhoga. And if he says the world is to be enjoyed, if he admits to bhoga, you can see why that would be culturally horrific for him. Because once he admits to bhoga, he accepts the karma kanda, which is all about bhukti and bhoga. So he can't even grammatically translate something as bhoga. Like that would already like damn him to the karma kanda. So instead he has to take the word bhunjita, do some crazy intellectual acrobatics to get the word protect, like raksha. And then once you get the word protect, then he says, oh, the Atman must be protected so he can maintain his anti-bhoga stance. And so the influence of Buddhism and the influence of Advaita Vedanta have created a very repressed India. I would say it's created a very repressed world. And in that way, we look a lot like our Abrahamic brethren. Both of us are so scared of pleasure and scared of the body and scared of the world because we've created this idea of the devil. The only devil that exists is our construct of her. That's the thing that tyrannizes us. There is no devil outside of that construct. But that construct comes from duality. The idea that something is pure and something is impure, something is good and something is bad. Once I have an other, that alone I call the devil. You know what the devil is? The tendency to see the other. That's it. And everyone's devil is just the other person's like everyone is an angel to themselves and everyone who is not that person is a devil to them. You know, so like the devil, the idea of the devil is just an otherizing principle that justifies our hatred and otherization. And that's rooted in duality. So once you have this idea of real and unreal, pure and impure, once you have this idea of knowledge and action, once you have the idea of monk and householder, you're fucked. Because on some level, you're going to see one thing is better than the other. And if you're one and you want to be the other, you'll have cognitive dissonance. If you are the one that you want to be, you'll have pride and superiority and fear that you'll fall. Like the whole thing is psychologically fraught the moment any sort of even remnant of duality appears. And that's why Shankara's translation of one must protect the self is problematic. The self does not need to be protected. Protected from what? Where is there fear where one doesn't recognize another? So, and once that you don't have to protect yourself and you're easeful and relaxed, then why should you not enjoy the world? After all, are you not enjoying God? There's a whole conversation to be had around the way Shankara approaches even the word in Sanskrit, bhunjita. And that's a whole lecture I could give on another evening. I could just go to town on the Katha Upanishad and on Taittiriya Upanishad and Shankara's commentary on it. I could just like have at it. But, you know, maybe I'll save that for Tuesday or Wednesday. It's kind of cute. My Jayanti is the same as Shankara's and arguably also Ramanuja's. So I think it would probably make him very happy if on my Jayanti, like, which is Shankara Jayanti on Tuesday, Wednesday, like that, I think it would make him very happy if I just did a class, like, just roasting him. I think he would like that. He's a 16-year-old boy. I think he'd have a good time. So maybe I'll do that. I'll just come at him. I'll just like take his stuff and just like go at him out of love. And you know, cause I would rather just have some stuff in front of me, like his Brahma Sutra or something, some bhasha in front of me, so I can like actually use his words and not just like present them in this way. But then it'd be also fun to attack Ramanuja. I think that whole thing would be fun because Ramanuja fights with Shankara and the two of them together makes for a really fun time. So it'd be nice to like just like get in there and just like I couldn't imagine a funner time than crossing swords like that, you know. But anyway, having said all of that, it's just his philosophy right now that we're questioning. And like notice the implication of Brahma as Brahman with Maya as being something other than Brahman, which is also considered unreal, is that you get a subtle duality here, which Ramanuja is actually trying to overcome, which Vallabha in the Shuddha Advaita tradition is also trying to overcome, which Abhinavagupta is trying to overcome. So this idea of like a subtle duality inheres in Shankara's framing of the self as something that needs to be protected and the world as something that is illusory that needs to be rejected. The idea of moving towards one thing and moving towards another is a false dichotomy. We can just like argue against the Katha Upanishad for its false dichotomy with reference to the Sukhupaya, and that's like what Tantra does. Tantra like takes these, I would even argue modern Buddhistic and Kevala Advaitic interpretations of the Vedas and the Upanishads, which are the, what do you call it? There's a word. Hegemonic. Yes, thank you. Which are the hegemonic narratives that we get in Hinduism today. This sort of Advaitic and Buddhistic sort of hatred of the world, demonization of the world as illusory, participating in the world as ignorance. Like that kind of narrative has a hegemonic influence over the minds of most Hindus in the world. And obviously back then it had a very strong influence over people. And that's why the work of Tantra, first and foremost, is a kind of karma kanda revivalist movement to course correct for leaning too much into that. Just like the Vedas, you'll find the Tantras are like revivalist. You know, they're attempting to revive the realism that we found in the Vedas. So where Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta will reject the world as unreal, the Vedas will present the world as real. And so the Tāntrik tradition will then reify or revisit that idea of realism. So Tantra will say, the world is real. The world that you see before you, it's real. And then whole conversations can be had in with regards to like in what sense? In what sense is the world real? And we say it's real as the self, as God. Nothing is unreal. There is no Maya except as the power of God to hide herself from herself, but nothing at any point is unreal. All of it is real. So Vedic realism finds a home again in the Tantric transmission. So Tantra revives Vedic realism in response to Buddhistic and Advaita Vedantic idealism. Secondly, Tantra revives ritualism and ceremony in response to the overemphasis of inquiry, contemplation, and anti-ritualism that you find in Buddhism and also in Kevala Advaita. Right? That's another thing. Third point is the Tantras reify the lack of a schism between the laity and the clerics, which is a response to the reification of that schism and the hierarchicalization of that schism in the Shankara Dashnami kind of system. You know, in the Buddhist world, you're better if you're a monk. In the Shankara world, you're better if you're a monk. You can only be liberated if you're a Buddhist monk or a Shankarite monk. Everyone else is fucked. Whereas in the Tantric world, it's no longer material. In fact, they won't discourage you from being a monk. It just makes no difference. You can be either a monk or a householder. In fact, they give you an in-between where you and your Bhairavi or Bhairava, you and your partner can both be monks together in this co-ed way where you're like exploring partnered rituals, but you're also like not at a job, making money, trying to like raise children. You know, so there's like this wonderful liminal space that you get in the Tantric world. And a lot of that is a reaction to a lot of the Shankara and Buddhist interpretations. That's cool to think about, right? So with all this cultural context in mind, let's zoom into the Tantric tradition itself. In the Tantric tradition, you'll find a broad spectrum of different kinds of texts. Most of them, like I just said, will present the world as real, but also they'll present rituals as real and really effective. So they'll give you rituals. A lot of those rituals, though, might be for the sake of attaining bhoga. No doubt. Therefore, just like the Vedic karma kanda, therefore being happy in this world, getting what you want in this world and also in some other worlds. But they don't stop there. What makes a tantra, as Ram Kanta, one of the early commentators in Kashmir, says, what makes a tantra is that it doesn't stop with bhoga. It also presents a path to moksha. So moksha through bhoga, or the ultimate bhoga that you can get through moksha, that seems to be what the Tantric tradition wants to say. So ultimately, the tantras are going to lead you to moksha. Some tantras are almost exclusively about moksha and they don't care about bhoga. Other tantras are about bhoga and moksha. They'll often say, like in the Phalashrutis, they'll say like, oh, whoever chants this. Think of the Lakshmi, the Mahalakshmi Stotram, which appears in a tantra. There it says, Eka Kalam, you know, like if you chant it once, Mahapapa Vinashaya or something. If you chant it once, right, like you don't, all your supreme sins will be removed, which is important because that means you can enjoy heavenly realms. You get like merit, you won't be dragged into any suffering. Second thing, Dvikalam, the second time you get wealth, right? You get dhanam. The third time, Sarva Shatru Vinashanam, all of your enemies will be killed. That's a very typically tantric thing to say. Like, be like, okay, if you chant this once, you get this stuff. If you chant this twice, you get this extra stuff. And if you chant it 3 times, fuck yeah, now we're gonna go to town on your enemies. Like to kill my enemies is a goal that the Vedic tradition had and the Tantric tradition also has. So it gives you techniques. Yashodehi Dishojahi. Kill my enemies, give me glory. Right? Rupam Dehi, Jayam Dehi, Yasho Dehi, Dvishojahi. When you look at the Argala Stotram, that's a properly speaking tantric text because the whole thing is about calling the goddess who is a warrior and then asking her for stuff. Just like how the king in the Chandi did, right? So we're saying, Maishasura Nirnashi, Bhaktanam Subhade Namaha, Rupam Dehi, Ma, make me beautiful. Rupam Dehi, Jayam Dehi, make me victorious. Yashodehi, there's Yashodhara there, the one who holds all the glory. So you have to ask her for this actually. Yashodehi, make me famous, make me glorious. So make me beautiful, make me victorious, make me famous, and fucking kill these motherfuckers on the internet. Ma, Yashodehi Dvishojahi, kill my enemies. Like, these are all properly speaking tantric goals. But now, when you come in with the more moksha-oriented mindset, you can do an apologetics around this. You can say, oh, no, give me spiritual beauty. That's valid. Give me spiritual beauty. Give me spiritual victory over my spiritual obstacles. Give me glory in a spiritual sense. And most of all, defeat my spiritual enemies. But the verse doesn't actually say that. The verse is pretty explicit and can be used explicitly in a magical context. again, none of this is like unique to us in the Vedic worldview, because we had the Vedas present the same thing. In the Vedic world, you have the same rituals that are meant to kill enemy tribes, that are meant to bring in wealth, that are meant to like give you merit and eliminate sin and like help you enjoy pleasure both here and in the hereafter. So the idea of using rituals like chanting verses from the Devi Mahatmyam or like Mahalakshmi Stotram or something, the idea of using verses to like do well in the world, that's never left Indians. Indians still do it all the time. Most of the ritual and ceremonial activity you have in the Indian context is going to be around marriage and jobs. And I told you that funny story about my mom. She wanted me to do well in my exams, because obviously then I would go to a good college, and if I went to a good college, I'd get a good job, and then God knows what happens after that, I guess. You just pay a lot of taxes to fund genocides, I guess. I don't know why anybody would want a good job and make a lot of money. But my mom, obviously, as a good Indian mother, wanted that of me. So she would make an offering at the local temple to a deity in the hopes that that deity would help me acquire secular knowledge, aparavidya, and therefore become successful in the secular world. But she fucked up. Every Thursday, Brihaspati, Jupiter's day, she would make an offering. She should have made an offering to Brihaspati. That would have made sense. He's like the guru planet, and he might help. She should have maybe made an offering to Ganesha or something. There are many deities she could have made an offering to. She chose Dakshinamurti. Upon the suggestion of some priest, she chose Dakshinamurti. And it's so funny because Dakshinamurti like uniquely gives the liberating insight of Advaita. He teaches through silence with the chin mudra. So I'm like, Ma, I think your thing worked. I got some kind of knowledge, but the literal opposite kind of knowledge you would want your boy to get, because that's the kind of knowledge that makes you not interested in the world, as it were. So I was just joking. I was thinking like, that was such a fortunate accident that she appealed to Dakshinamurti on my behalf to get knowledge. And I'm so convinced like that did a lot for me. Like I'm just convinced that her vrata did a lot for me. But my grandmother on my mother's side, for 1 month, she refused to eat anything except whatever she could find on the temple floor of the local temple. Can you imagine? You have to know Indians to understand this kind of austerity, this kind of faith in ritualism. Or Italian Catholics or something like that. It's just so real to them, you know? Like when you see Catholics in Spain, in Portugal, in Italy, when you see Indians, like Jewish people, like people who have these ancient traditions that like are ritually oriented, it's real to them. They see the results. And so, you know, my grandmother, why was she eating rice off the temple floor for a whole month? Literally, she would eat nothing but whatever grains she could find on the floor. Why? I mean, is it to realize God? Or no, it's because her child was sick. It's really interesting. You know, like her child, who is my grandfather, he was sick and dying. So that was her vrat. She took that vrat in order for the child to get better. Holy Mother did the same thing. You know, for 3 days or something, she like just laid on the floor and refused to eat or whatever in the hopes of helping Sri Ramakrishna be healthy again. It's a Hindu woman understands this very well. Fasting, taking on austerities in order to like make a transaction with the forces of nature, if you will. So like you'll find like people say, I'll chant this verse every single day, every Thursday or something. My mom would do this archana every single Thursday. She's making a deal, as it were. She's making a sacrifice. Do you see how this is just a modern understanding of yagya? If yaga means sacrifice, it doesn't have to look like the homa of the Vedic sacrifice. It can look like this instead. It can look like simply appearing at the temple at a certain time and fasting that whole day, or giving something like some money or some coconut or some green coconut with sugar or something. You see, the logic is the same. The logic is still a logic of sacrifice. I will sacrifice to the forces of nature, personified as this or that deity, in order to get the forces of nature in this transaction to do something for me. And typically that's going to have something to do with the world. And how can you begrudge people that? How can you begrudge my grandmother for doing whatever she could in a place where there weren't any doctors, mind you, for her child to live? Is that so bad? Is that bhoga? Is that worldliness? Is she pursuing pleasure and power and fame? Is she trying to kill her enemies? She just wants her baby boy to survive. And believe it or not, he did. And you know, I can tell you so many medical miracles that I've witnessed and that my parents have witnessed over the years. My parents are allopathic doctors of scientific mind, but they're also Indians, you know, and also Hindus and whatnot. So they've been in this intersection between the allopathic medical world and the things that ritualism can do for you. And again, it's astounding to see these medical marvels. Not to say one is better than the other. Maybe both together can be equally good. I don't know. Like, get your allopathy and also do your rituals. That seems to be the modern Hindu approach. But you find that, like, that Hindu ethos of doing sacrifice in the Vedic context remains with us today. The vast majority of people in the Hindu laity, and I would even argue in the Hindu clerical community, are performing rituals for worldly outcomes, and they're not always for, and very rarely are they even for, exorbitant amounts of wealth or for power or even for pleasure. Often they're pretty practical. They're just, let my kid go to school so they can make a living and like take care of the family with 9 children because, you know, we don't have access to birth control or the education necessary to be even able to use birth control. That's like it, you know? Is that so bad? Like, this is in my defense of bhoga. I'm going to say, like, what the fuck is, like, the problem here? Like, why is everyone so upset about siddhis and powers and about rituals that bring wealth and protection? Like, people literally need it to live. Like, you know, it's a very privileged position to say, oh, doing tantra for magic is bad. You can say that because when you're sick, you can go to the doctor down the road and pay some ridiculous like healthcare scam money and then get like some scam medicine and then like ruin your body long term to get some temporary relief from your illness. Like, fine, that's all well and good if you have a doctor, but what if you live in a village that doesn't have a doctor? Your only doctor is the sadhu. Your only medicine is that like bhasma that the sadhu gives you to like wipe on your child's forehead or something. Your only recourse is God. Your only means of action is chanting the Mahalakshmi Stotram like 108 times every Friday or something and fasting every Friday. Like, that's what you do, and it works. In many contexts it works, and that's why we just do it. You think we would keep doing it if it didn't work? That's another thing I want to like put to the world. I'm like, look, we've been at it a long time. Indians have been doing this for like thousands and thousands of years. Do you think culture and tradition is so strong that an empty form can just be perpetuated for literally 9,000 years? I mean, just think about what you're saying. If you're saying that all of our rituals are empty cultural forms, then oh my god, that's an even greater cultural achievement. That we for no reason have kept alive for 9,000 years empty cultural forms that mean nothing to nobody? Think about that for a moment. Like, I think it's even greater. It speaks even higher of Indians if they've somehow been able to do that. But I don't think that's very realistic. I think if humans have kept something alive, it's because it works. And so the reason why we've kept alive this Vedic ritualism or the Vedic yagya mentality, even though it's understood in a new context, is because it works. This is what people are calling bhoga, and this is what they are unjustly demonizing as being lower or worse. It's important that in the Devi Mahatmya, mother's compassion extends to surata as well as to samadhi. The one who wants samadhi gets samadhi, the one who wants a kingdom gets a kingdom, and mother does not at any point judge. She's not like, oh, bhoga bad, maybe later you'll be mature and you'll want moksha. Oh, moksha good, you're so great. No, she just gives them both what they want, as if to say they're not two different things. There are two ways of looking at the same thing, maybe sequentially or maybe independently. Coming back to this idea then, much of modern Hinduism still draws from the Tāntrik, which I'm going to say is the Vedic idea of sacrifice. So the rituals of the Vedas are often going to be kind of bhoga oriented, with the understanding that through mastering the world, through conquering the world, through getting what you want in the world, that's the best way to going past the world. You know, so I think that's a realistic approach. It's not quite the idealistic, Buddhistic or Advaita Vedanta approach that expects you to renounce everything at the beginning. Rather, it's a realistic approach that says, what to say of renunciation? Nobody knows how. Just like do what you want, and here's a ritual modality to get what you want in a dharmic way, actually, because it's dharma. Like the tantras are shastra; they're presenting dharma. So when you do things in that way, you're doing things arguably in an ethical and harmonious way, even when it comes to killing your enemies. You think that killing your enemies is not ethical? Okay, fine. Then everybody should demilitarize. Everybody should abolish all cops. I think that would be great. But you know what would happen if you did? Then you would come to us tantrics and ask for black magic. Because if you don't have your cops to protect you, what little protection they can give, I don't know. If you don't have your military to go terrorize other countries, then you will come to us in the smashan and ask for protective rituals. Because those are necessary too, you know. That's still part of like nature. It's like utopic and idealistic to think that we can live in a world where there won't be some need for defending your borders or like defending your boundaries or protecting yourself. Like there's need for that. There's need for killing your enemies. There's need for healing. There's need for beauty rituals. All these things have their role and place in society. But tantras, although it can seem like that's what they're mainly about, ultimately they're about moksha. So often you find in the beginning of a tantra, the Jnanapada will explain some kind of bondage moksha idea, and it will explain like the ultimate goal is whatever, you know, and it will present a moksha idea, and then it will give you rituals for bhoga and for moksha. So the definition of tantra is any text revealed by Lord Shiva or by Lord Parvati that, and I'm talking about Hindu tantra, of course, in this Hindu Tantra, there's Narada and Vishnu and Lakshmi who are also revealing Tantras. But Tantra is a Shaiva thing, and then later it becomes a Vaishnava and Jain and Buddhist thing. So Jainic Tantra, Buddhist Tantra, obviously Manjushri reveals Buddhist Tantra or whatever, right? Like, but in the Shaiva world, it's Shiva or Parvati. So I'm just going to stick to that. So any text that's revealed by Shiva or Parvati or some other divine being like Narada or Vishnu or Manjushri, in which you learn rituals that both give you bhoga and moksha, that can be called Tantra. Yes, a Tantra is any text revealed by Lord Shiva in which you find rituals for bhoga and for moksha. Typically, it has a Jnana Pada, philosophical section, a very copious Kriya Pada, a ritual section, Yoga Pada, which can be copious or can sometimes be very brief, a kind of esoteric, meditative visualization mantra kind of thing, and also Charya Pada, like how to be in the world and what to do. A lot of Tantras say, be a Vaishnava in the world. It's kind of cute. It's like, conduct yourself as a perfect Vaishnava in public and do these rituals only at night when nobody can see you. I'll show you a Tantra later that has that exact line. It says, be a Vaishnava. Like, it's kind of cute. In other words, be like, appear to care about purity when you wander about in the world just to protect the reputation of Shaiva Acharyas. Anyway, okay. Having said all of this, when you look at the Tantras, the vast majority of them, notice, are going to be about rituals, which makes the Tantric tradition almost synonymous with ritualism and ceremonialism. But just like the Buddhist, like Buddha, and later the Advaitins, like Shankara, just like they kind of reacted to the Karma Kanda, seeing it as overly external, overly objective, and insufficient in cultivating inner insight, just like that, within the Tantric world, you also have a reaction movement. You also have a sort of antithesis. If the thesis is ritualism gives you both bhoga and moksha, what you get on the Tantric antithesis is no, ritualism is like a sweet given to children or like a goblin story told to children to get them to do the right thing. This is literally Lord Shiva's language in the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra between verses 7 and 13. He says literally all these depictions of Bhairava, everything you've learned from the Tantras at this point is nothing but a story told to children. He even uses the word idiots. He says those who are stupid, a dull intellect people, they need this to help them with their meditation, and it's here to keep them busy. I kid you not. I mean, I'll pull it up later, but like his language is everything you have learned up till now, O Parvati. Remember, he says, sadhu, sadhu, mama priya, idam tantra saram. This is the very essence of Tantra. Congratulations, my dear, for asking the right question. You know, because she's asking, like, what's the essence of all of this? She's saying, like, I've studied all the Tantras in their threefold presentation, primary, secondary, tertiary sources maybe, or dualistic, qualified, non-dualistic, non-dualistic. She studied all the 10 Shaiva Agamas, the 18 Raudra Agamas. She studied the 64 Bhairava Agamas. She's saying, I've studied all of this, but still, my Lord, I still have doubts. And then she asks a series of questions, and then Lord Shiva's like, sadhu, sadhu, mama priye, tantra saramidam. I'm so happy, baby, you asked these questions because, you know, now I'm gonna tell you the real secret. And then he says, all this other stuff, bullshit. Like, Lord Shiva himself revealed it. He himself, like, taught the rituals and gave all these, like, deities. And now he himself is saying, it was just there for the dull-witted to help them with their meditation. It was just there for the restless people to keep them busy, give them a ritual. It's like giving a baby a rattle. It keeps them out of trouble. And he says it's like giving them sweets to get them to do the right thing, and telling them ghost stories to get them to stop doing the wrong thing. That's what all that was for. Not that it's useless. It has a place, but it should be transcended. Then what Lord Shiva is going to do in the Vijnana Bhairava is he's going to present these like really atypical tantric things, like, oh, just like stare at a wall, or look at the way the light falls on the wall, or have sex, or eat delicious. By the way, the sex rituals are like seriously rituals, you guys. It's very boring. Like, if you want to have sex, don't come to Tantra and expect to have sex, because it will ruin your sex life. Like, you have to find a partner who's like willing to sit there for like 2 hours while you install deities on various points of their yoni. Like, it's like, trust me, it's like not fun. It can be, but not in the way that sex is fun. Like, if I want to have sex, I'd rather just like have sex. This is different. This is ritualism. It's like the achamanams and the nyasas, and there's nyasas, and the yoni installation, it's called Shanka Patra Puja, and there's like all these things. It's ritualistic, right? The Vijnana Bhairava says, no, just like actually have sex. Like, it's like, don't even worry. You don't even need to like chant all these mantras or whatever. Just have sex. And here's how you turn it into a spiritual practice. Or what about eating good food? Just like eat good food and meditate on the way the flavors unfurl in your mouth. Vrijimbranath. What a beautiful word. jrimba, to like expand. And like, what if you just listen to music? Verse 73 is all about just like listening to music. Verse 72 is all about eating delicious food, right? Like, there are all these verses. Verse 68, 69, they're all about sexual encounters, not just partnered, but also just like fantasizing and reminiscing about a previous sexual experience. There's a verse about like embracing your long lost friend. There's a verse about laughing at jokes. Like all these things are just like day-to-day life things. The Vijnana Bhairava, like the Bhagavad Gita, and I'll come back to that theme later, is revolutionary because it turns everyday life into the ritual. And when you get to the end of the Vijnana Bhairava, you're going to see this very beautiful strategy that you find in some of these like more contemplative Gnostic tantras. They say the real japa is just the breath, is the ajapa japa. It's the one that you're chanting 26,000 times a day. When you breathe in, you don't even have to say hum, it's there in the breath. When you breathe out, you don't have to say sa, it's there in the breath. So you don't have to sit there and go hamsa, 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 because you are. You don't have to say I am to be. What mantra do you need? Your very being, your very life breath is your mantra. With every breath you affirm your being. So when you breathe in, when you breathe out, japa is as natural as that. How beautiful. You don't have to sit with a rosary and say Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. You know what that is? A goblin story told to scare children, a sweet told to children to get them to do the right thing. How cheap is Om Namah Shivaya compared to the breath? That's what Shiva himself, to whom the mantra is attributed, is saying. Just breathe and just focus on the breath and notice that your very breath is vimarshana, is a self-reflexive act of pure being. I am, and I know that I am. Do I need a mantra for that? Just notice, like, what mantra could possibly give you yourself? Aren't you the one chanting the mantra? Let me ask this question. If you didn't chant the mantra, would you still be here? Yes. So then what can the mantra give you? That's the logic. And Abhinavagupta puts it so beautifully. He says, does the sun illumine the pot or does the pot illumine the sun? Obviously the former, not the latter. You, consciousness, are like the sun and your practices are like pot. Today is 420, by the way. So like, what does the pot do for you? It cannot illumine the sun. Namah Shivaya can never reveal Shiva. Just mark my words. Namah Shivaya cannot reveal Shiva any more than Shiva can reveal himself to himself in the breath. I mean, we're not saying don't do Namah Shivaya. Like Lord Shiva, obviously, I'm now in this bhav, okay? So I'm just going to talk about this in this bhav. But obviously, like, I also really like the Karma Kanda stuff. But just, this is a cool bhav because the Vijnana Bhairava is so badass in this way. And it just proves the point by saying God is not na sharira kalpa mukha hasta adi. You know, like, it's, God is not a being with hands and a face or weapons. Like, that's all what you get in the other tantras. Like, Kali has these weapons and she looks like this, she looks like that. Abhinava says, you know what Kali is? Shepo jnanam sankyanam gatinada iti kramat kalanam kali kala sankarshaniti abhidhiyate. She is that which projects, that which cognizes, that which delimits or discerns, that which moves, that which resonates, that which is a sequence of unfolding, which is also a simultaneity, that which has the power of self-recursive or self-reflexive awareness, that which can imagine, that which devours time and space, that is called Kali. What is that? Awareness. Awareness projects the world. In awareness, the world is cognized. Awareness with its power of language can discern between one thing and another thing. Awareness is also dynamic because it, creates, maintains, and destroys. But most importantly, it is that into which the world dissolves, like in samadhi or like in deep sleep. So awareness creates, maintains, and destroys the world. Kali is the one who creates, maintains, and most importantly, devours the world. Kali is awareness. Who is awareness? You. You are Kali. So what does Kali look like? All this. Dhyayed Uma Lingita Vishwarupam. Lord Shiva is Vishwarupam. He looks like all this. The lingam is a symbol. How long, O child, will you play with your toys, your symbols? When will you look past the lingam to the Vishwarupa, to what the lingam represents? Like, how long will you take... the word lingam doesn't mean phallic. It means symbol. Linga means a sign or a symbol. So how long will you look at the symbol thinking it's the thing? Why don't you look at what the symbol is pointing to and then go beyond the need for any symbols? Like, why don't you take Kali as an artistic representation of reality and not an actual form? That's what the Vijnana Bhairava will say. Natu dhyanam sharira kalpa hasta mukha what does it say? Nischala nirakara buddhir, keeping the mind nischala, unmoving, in that nirakara, nirashraya, in that unchanging, nirakara, undivided, groundless reality. It's very Dzogchen. You can see there's a flavor of just sky-like awareness, luminosity. Lord Shiva is Vyoma Vyapine, Vyoma Rupaya. He's the all-pervasive void. He's formless. This is the Vijnana Bhairava's understanding of God. Who is God? The void, radiant with light. That's called Kali or Para. And who is that? You. And what mantra can give you that? You don't even need to say Hamsa. It's encoded in your very breath. So towards the end of the Vijnana Bhairava, you're going to find verses that say, the real japa is just breath. The real homa is any time you are satisfied. Because homa is about tripyatam devi. It's about satisfying the deities with ghee. Anytime you are satisfied because you are the deity, that's called a homa. And then there's all these wonderful verses where the mind is the chetana, is the ladle. The thoughts and cognitions and sensations are the ahutis, the offering, and the fire of consciousness is the one to whom the offering is made. So it's like Brahmarpanam, Brahmahaver, Brahmagno, Brahmanahutam, Brahmevatena, Gandavyam, Brahma Karma, Samadhina. That's a crazy verse, by the way, because Sri Krishna is saying, you are the one making the offering, right? But you are also the offered. You are also the offering. So the one making the offering, the pujari or the pujarini, and the one to whom the offering is made, the puja, and the very offering itself, the ahuti or the act of offering, puja, pujari, puja, they're all just one reality. So who will give what to whom? The Vijnana Bhairava uses the same language. So homa is redefined. Yaga is literally just sex. I kid you not. The word yaga or sacrifice literally just means having sex. It's called Rudra Shakti Avesha, the immersion of Rudra into Shakti. Sorry, it's a bit heteronormative there, but it doesn't have to be. And then what else? There's meditation, which means just being, just resting unshakably in the ground of awareness, which is formless. What else? Just name any practice. Japa, homa, puja. It says puja. There's no possibility of puja because who will give what to whom and what will be given that isn't already that to which is being. It's like they take all the external practices and they interiorize them. And you'll see what the Vijnana Bhairava does, Somananda will do also. And Abhinavagupta in chapters 2, 3, and 4 will do, both in Tantra Loka and Tantra Sara. So this presents a wholly new kind of Tantra. A tantra of inquiry focused on an focused on a formless, awareness-oriented understanding of the absolute, a self-oriented understanding, where the goal here is recognition, and therefore ritual and external formal things are de-emphasized. Whereas the other kind of tantra, it kind of externalizes God and says God is this being which can be interacted with almost externally as well as internally, and then it presents a series of modalities, usually rooted in the external world, like ritual, like japa, like homa, like an actual literal fire is required for homa. An altar and literal flowers are required for offering. A literal yantra is offered. Like all of these things are one part of tantra, and the other part of tantra is all the contemplative stuff. Right? It's been 2 hours, and it's funny because this is my attempt to review some of the material from Denver 2 weeks ago. So hopefully those of you who were there in Denver, like this gives a bit more context for that discussion. But I also remember that when we were in Denver, we offered another piece here, and it's worth reviewing, the Jnana and Kriya piece. So consciousness, reality, Shiva, is endowed with these 5 powers: Chit Shakti, Ananda Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and the most important thing is Icha Shakti, which I spent most of my time in Denver talking about. That Icha Shakti is the third thing that reconciles the seeming tension between Jnana and Kriya. Now, I want to present the 3 Shaktis. If you think about 5 Shaktis, these 2 just use the Chin Mudra. Chit Shakti, Ananda Shakti, Icha Shakti. Kriya Shakti, Icha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, yes? If you use the Chin Mudra, you'll see this Jnana, the Chit and Ananda are one. You can't think of Chit and Ananda as separate. In fact, you can't think of any of these fingers as separate from my hand. But there's a relationship between Chit and Ananda that's a bit closer than these other 3. So Chit means consciousness. Consciousness, remember, in our understanding, is inherently self-reflexive. So I am, and I know that I am. And remember, what is it to be an unlimited being that knows yourself? It is to be unlimited in your bliss. Because bliss is the effect of limitlessness. Ananta is Ananda. So Ananta, without end, equals Ananda, bliss. Because Yovai Bhuma Tatsukam, Nalpe Sukhamasti. I'm not going to take time to explain that right now. I'll just axiomatically put it out. So Ananda means the infinite. And if you are the infinite and you know yourself to be the infinite, you are also synonymously bliss itself. So Ananda and Chit are the same thing. Yes? So Shakti is Ananda, Shiva is Chit, and Shiva is Shakti. So what it is to be Shiva is to repose in your own blissful infinity. That's called awareness, and it's already what you are. But unlike Advaita Vedanta that presents Satchit Ananda as Shanta, meaning actionless or non-dynamic, in the non-dual Tantric world, as you well know, we present Brahman as dynamic. Shakti o Brahma Abhed. Jini Brahma, iti Shakti, Jini Brahma, tini Shakti, tini Ima. Right? Like Sri Ramakrishna says, that which is Brahman is verily Shakti, and that's what I call Ma. So Ishvara, God, is none other than the dynamism of Brahman, and it's real. Yes, that's Sri Ramakrishna's claim. It's a Tāntrik claim that Shakti is the dynamism of Brahman. But how do you understand that? It's a Trika, the Devi Traya, Para, Apara. So if you take Kali and you zoom into Kali, you'll get the Trika deities, Para, and Apara. What are they? The transcendent, immanent. They refer to the three powers of God, which are Icha, desiring, Jnana, cognitive power, and Kriya, acting. And you'll notice every embodied being demonstrates this. Will, desire, knowledge, the ability to cognize certain things or demarcate or delimit certain experiences, and the action to move towards or move away from those things based on the Jnana. And they kind of like relate to one another. When I have Jnana, I have Icha. Because of my Icha, I have Kriya. Or because I have Icha, I go get Jnana. And once I get Jnana, I have Kriya. So right now, you had a desire to hear something spiritual. You came over here. I filled your head with a bunch of nonsense. That gives you Jnana. And now, if you're excited, you can go and do a ritual. So your action, Kriya, was only possible because of the Jnana, but your Jnana was only possible because of your Icha. You know, Icha, will, is required to get Jnana, which is required to get Kriya. But at the same time, Kriya might give you more Jnana, which then might deepen your Icha. So you can't think of them in this black and white sequential way where one obviously leads to the other. They interact with one another. They all play off of one another. So any being, like a Jane or an Aishama or like Andres or like a Viranatha, like any being, like a cat or whatever, every single being is going to have these three primordial powers: the willing power, the doing power, and the knowledge power or the cognizing power. The Jnana Shakti, the contemplative power, is arguably what we emphasize in the Vijnana Bhairava, in Somananda's Shiva Drishti, in Abhinavagupta's chapters 2, 3, and 4 of Tantrasara and Tantraloka. These are the Tantric traditions that are most interested in the Jnana Shakti, the power of recognition, cognition, awareness. Whereas the Kriya Shakti, the power of action, the Apara Shakti, that is represented by those Tantric traditions that are mostly about ceremonials. And so in that lecture called The Two Tantric Transmissions, Jnana versus Kriya, I was making this claim that Icha Shakti is the way to reconcile Jnana and Kriya. Okay, so much for now. All of this is just a recap of that Denver Sangha, Two Transmissions of Tantra. The lecture is called Two Transmissions of Tantra, Jnana versus Kriya, Meditation versus Ritual. Right, that was the name of that lecture. So do refer to that lecture to see how we reconcile that dichotomy with an appeal to this third thing called Icha Shakti or desire. Then I gave another lecture last week, Monday, and that lecture was called Three Types of People, Three Types of Tantra, but I'm thinking of changing the title. Instead of that, I think we'll call it Two Types of Tantra. Fuck, it sounds exactly like the previous title. Pashubhava. I got it. We'll call it this. Pashubhava versus Virabhava. Right hand path versus left hand path Tantra. So now I want to present another dichotomy. Again, remember the first dichotomy is between Jnana and Kriya. Its reconciliation is in Icha, okay? And again, I don't need to get into that now because we already have a whole lecture for like 3 hours on it. You can refer to that one. So I just wanted to present this dichotomy though to show you that the contemplative, jnana-oriented, interiorized practice part of Tantra is often seen as being in tension with the active, action-oriented, ritualistic side of Tantra. There's a tension between meditation and ritual, or a tension between Jnana and Kriya. And the whole point of today's preamble was just to show you that there's a Vedic precedent for this. This is the piece that I didn't offer in that other lecture that I thought it would be good to offer now. There's a Vedic precedent for the tension that we find in the Tantric world because, as we've proven in the last 2 hours or so, it's mirroring the exact tension we find in the Vedic world, which, in the past few centuries has been monopolized by the Jnana portion. But I also hope to show that that doesn't actually take away from the day-to-day, like on-the-ground Hindus' appreciation for chanting stotrams, going to temples and doing archanas to get priests to like intervene for their children to go to Harvard or whatever. There's still a jnana like emphasis in the narratives, especially in the higher levels of academic institutions. But on the ground, I think the Karma Kanda is fine. People are still understanding the Vedas in the exact same way as we always have, and we're still pretty life-affirming about things. So nothing much has changed, I don't think. And so when you think of the Tantras next to the Vedas, I hope to make a case for one continuous cultural transmission. I don't like to reify the idea that the Tantras are something different from the Vedas. As much as I sometimes make fun of Bhaskara Raya or Lakshmidhara for really stretching to try to Vedicize the Tantras, they were right to do so, because that's the correct attitude of a non-dualist, to take any kind of dichotomy and try to reconcile it in a third thing. So now I want to present another dichotomy. And I did that last week, so I'll very briefly put it in front of you. The dichotomy is between Pashubhava and Virabhava. The Tantric tradition understands these two, broadly speaking, categories of practitioner. The first practitioner, we say, is more tamasic. And last week, I gave a different reading of tamas, and I used the word tamas to mean externalized. The more tamasic you are, the more externalized you're going to be. Meaning, the more you look outside of yourself for the explanations and answers to your problems. So if you're angry, you will blame someone else for it. You know, you'll say, if I'm upset, someone else needs to fix me. I'm not going to fix myself because I'm not at fault. I deserve to be angry. You fucked up, so I'm angry. You take accountability. You be responsible. And daddy, you do something about it. Right? Like that. And arguably, if we're going to be honest, that's most of us. We blame the world for our conditions. We look to the world for our solutions. And most importantly, we look to the world for our satisfaction. We're like swiping on dating apps. We're like ordering food online. We're buying things on Amazon. We're like out in the world trying to get a job, trying to make money, going on vacations. Almost all of our endeavors are externally oriented. This is the tamasic mind. And again, it is not at all a judgment. It is merely a diagnosis. Right? Like, it's not wrong. Again, like using all the stuff we talked about in the beginning of the lecture, it's not wrong to be like this, to think like this. It's natural, actually. And it might even be a stage of development, you know, to use Jungian archetypes or something, like the the Jungian archetype of the orphan. The orphan is always like, somebody else did this to me. You know, like, if you have any anger towards anyone in the world who you feel like has wronged you, just in that moment, check in with yourself, realize you're being a child. In other words, you are regressing into that child that you were that didn't get the support and the care that you deserved, and now you're going back into that headspace and feeling just as vulnerable as you were then. But you aren't vulnerable now anymore. You have your own agency, and back then you didn't. But when you recreate that memory, you feel like you're without agency, and then now you project that out into the world. This, from a Jungian point of view, is called the orphan archetype. You were vulnerable, you needed some care, you didn't get it, and so that person is at fault. And yes, that makes sense. If you couldn't provide for yourself at that time, that person fucked up by not providing for you. But they're not here now. However, that attitude can stay with you. And so you can put it on the world. You can be like, just like daddy or mommy didn't take care of me when I was a child, I now need the world to take care of me. You'll put this on your partners, you'll put this on your friends, you'll put this on the world. This is an orphan archetype, and it's fine. It's just a stage of development. Everyone has to go through it at some point. So if this is true and you come to spiritual life, so if you have, like I was saying last week, a predominant kind of orphan archetype or kind of like externalized way of being in the world, when you come to spiritual life, it's going to be very important to you that your spiritual teachers have external sources of authority. Right? That's the point I was making last week. So institutional spirituality is going to become more important to you, and that's good because institutional spirituality takes responsibility away from you. You don't have to be as discerning with your teachers if there's a cultural, peer-reviewed, corroborated system of checks and balances. In other words, an institution that can do that for you. So if an institution elects gurus, then you can trust the institution to provide you with the guru that is safe. And if that guru is no longer safe, you can trust the institution to fire them and give you another guru. Right? You don't have to discern. You don't have to walk away. You don't have to like walk towards. You just kind of like give up your power to the institution. And you should do that because you're not yet ready to like, you know, be responsible. Because you're not yet at that, arguably, like I was saying last week, it's not yet a stage of development that is relevant for you. This adolescent stage comes next, arguably, if you want to think of things sequentially. In the adolescent stage, we say there's more rajas. So tamas is when you're more externalized. The adolescent stage is when you're moving away from tamas, and so naturally that rajas, that activity, that dynamism is expressed as rebellion. So whatever they do in the institution, you want to be anti-authoritarian, anti-institutional, and so you start to transgress just for the sake of it. If they offer with your right hand, you offer with your left hand. So I was going to say the Vāmācāra or the Kaulachara sometimes has that flavor a bit. Right, where it's just like breaking rules just to break rules. And you'll see that's very true with Mātangini. A lot of the worship of Mātangi is just understanding the rules of the right hand or understanding the rules of the institutional form of Tantra, otherwise known as Shaiva Siddhanta, and then just breaking them. Do you know, like if you are supposed to offer with your right hand, you offer with your left hand. If you're not supposed to lick food before offering it, then you specifically offer licked food. By the way, there's an in-between kind of thing that I learned from my guru where it's like, you don't have to go all the way left and lick the food and give it to Matangi. You can actually give Matangi the prasad that you've already given to other deities. You see how it's in between? In the other context, you can only give deities fresh food. In the fully left context, you yourself lick the food and eat it and then give it to Matangi. In the middle ground, you give Matangi food that's already been tasted but by other deities. Referencing a story from the Pranatoshini Tantra where it's actually Shiva's leftovers that Matangi gets. It's a beautiful mantra. Leya choshana panadi tambulam anulepanam nirmalya bhojanam. Like, oh mother, I give you all this food that has been licked and touched and kissed. Something like that. Like, by the command of Lord Shiva, I have done this or something. So like there's a mantra that says, I know this is wrong, but Lord Shiva alone told me to do it. In other words, the tantras told me to do it, so I'm doing it. To address the cognitive dissonance, arguably, that many people must feel when they're told to do rituals that are obviously like, they'll send them to hell or something, like if they do it. Oh my God, like to smell wine, you go to hell. Right? No, you don't go to hell for smelling wine. You have to redo your initiation. If you drink wine without preparing it in the proper way, the Kaula Arnava Tantra says you like go to hell and shit. So you're Naraka Loka or whatever. It's like some scary shit, right? Like, so like the cognitive dissonance around doing something wrong is obviously considerable. And so these mantras are all speaking to it. So a lot of this Matangi sadhana, she's known as Pishachini. And I was talking about that last week. Like, you can really understand why we have the reference to Pishachas and Pishachinis and Ucchistā and Chandala and Chandalini. Like, all of those references become important when you think in terms of like just child psychology. Like, the orphan has become the adolescent. The wanderer and warrior archetype, to use Jungian terms now, has awakened. And so you want to move as far away from that institutional, orthodox, Brahmanical, patriarchal, dualistic, externalized mode as possible. So you start leaning towards the internalization of these traditions. You start transgressing. Even if you do external rituals, the flavor of those rituals is going to be naturally transgressive and naturally subversive. Like, all of that is called Vira Bhava. And I argued that the gurus of the Vira or what do you call Vama world are not necessarily different from the gurus of the Pashu world. They can be the same guru, by the way. But arguably, a Pashu teacher might not be a Vira teacher, but a Vira teacher can be a Pashu teacher. In other words, if you're outside the institution, you can also be in the institution. But if you're inside the institution, you might be averse to being outside of the institution. So like what you find is in the Vama world, the Kaulācāra world, in the left-hand part of Tantra, you get more goddess worship, and goddess worship typically involves more transgressive, taboo practices. Usually there's like a loosening around the rules. There's a kind of fetishization of impurity, or at least the transcendence of the dichotomy of purity and impurity through voluntarily engaging in impure practices. But more importantly, you get charismatic gurus who might not be vetted by institutions. And therefore, it puts way more responsibility on the part of the student to be discerning when it comes to their gurus. You're more likely to get like crazy wisdom on this side. Whereas on the other side, you're more likely to get grounded, stable, kind of law-abiding wisdom. Both forms of wisdom, different people will react to it in different ways, and different people need to hear things in different ways at different times in their journey. So you can think of these as independent paths. If you are more tamasic, in that you are more attracted to the world and you need external forms of support, meaning more rules, more regulations, more rituals. If you're more into classical music, okay, wonderful. That's what Shaiva Siddhanta and the right-hand path, Dakshina Marga, might be for. Arguably, you maybe graduate from that once you start to develop your own like sort of internal discernment. You graduate from that, and now you have this Vāmācāra or Kaulācāra, where the Raja kind of guna is predominant, Raja guna. So here, you're more interested in moving away from that institution, articulating a sense of self outside of that community and that structure. And so Vāmācāra, Kaulācāra, it leans towards the goddess, it leans towards non-duality, it embraces transgressive or subversive practices. Mātangini is, of course, the ultimate metaphor or ultimate incarnation or ultimate deity that represents this, because it's the goddess, Kali, but more importantly, it's the goddess representing transgression, representing ucchistā, the principle of defilement. She is green, and more importantly, she's got wild hair, not braided hair like Saraswati, but wild hair, like a prostitute's, arguably. And she's usually depicted as being drunk. She's holding a bowl, usually filled with some kind of liquor, like she's got a kapala patra, and her kapar is filled with some kind of either blood or some kind of intoxicant, and she's like, her eyes are chanchala, rolling about. She's, Madira Nayana, right? Madira meaning her eyes are like intoxicated, and she's holding a sword, and typically she's garlanded either in skulls or in gunjahara seeds, so in poisonous berries. So she's wearing poisonous berries, holding a wine cup, she's drunk, often kind of disheveled, and therefore she's Chandala, Chandalini. Chandala means cremation ground dwelling outcast. So Mātangini, she's an outcast goddess, maybe the daughter of an elephant tamer or something like that. There's some links to Buddhism here that we can explore, but we won't. But there's like a Mātangini idea, where in the right-hand path, you become a pishacha, you become a pishachini. Everything that you considered holy in the right hand, in the left-hand path, you transgress. You know, so to them, you look like a pishacha. Drunk all the time, wandering about at night, eating meat, offering semen, like engaging in sexual practices, worshipping, terrifying goddesses, maybe even trying to acquire powers. All of these things that the right will demonize, you embrace. So of course you become a demon to them. You know, so the idea of pisacha or pisachini and the worship of pisachinis, the idea that Matangi is a pisachini. Look, I'm holding a black monster with a green, like, it's like, I just thought it was kind of Matangi coded. So anyway, I just realized now. I was like, wait a minute, look at this. I was like, yeah, this is pretty fucking Matangi coded. Like on inside, it's like, it's green. So anyway, this idea of like the transgressive left, it's really depicted by this green goddess, by Matangi. But there's a third thing. Just like when we present the dichotomy of jnana and kriya, we can reconcile it with iccha. Just like when we present the dichotomy of Pashubhava and Virabhava, we can do the same thing. How do we reconcile the dichotomy? What's the third thing? So, like, just as Iccha is to Jnana and Kriya as the synthesis of the thesis and antithesis, what do you guys think the equivalent would be in the context of the Virabhava versus Pashubhava dichotomy? Virabhavas have more rajas. They're moving away from the institution and starting to internalize. And that means, by the way, I should say this. Tamoguna practitioners are externalized, but so too are Rajoguna practitioners. They are also externalized because what they're doing is in reference to the external institution. Do you see it's not that different. One is moving towards, one is running from. You can even say they both have Rajoguna, it's just a matter of where they're turning. One who turns towards the institution. If you want the approval of your elders, if you want the approval of honorable people, if you want rules and regulations and to belong to a community, then your Rajoguna will be expended, your energy will be expended in that direction. This makes you a Pashubhava practitioner and very, very like supported by things like Shaiva Siddhanta or purity, impurity oriented things. Like you probably need to learn to be like taking showers and wearing clean clothes, and you know, a kind of Pashubhava practitioner, you shouldn't give them substances. They'll become addicted to them, you know, because they're externalized. So it's like, if you ever find yourself needing a substance, by the way, be careful. Like it's dangerous because sometimes in my world, you might find that there's like alcohol flowing freely or like cigarettes or whatever. I have to be careful that no Pashubhava type practitioners come into the space, and you should be discerning as adults. You should understand like what you should and shouldn't do. But if you like start smoking cigarettes, you might be fucked if you're not the kind of person who can like, you know, like not smoke them when you don't want to smoke them. You know what I mean? Like it's like alcohol, cigarettes, like drugs, these things pale in comparison to what we're really doing, but they're helpful for as offerings, and they're fun also, but they're not that fun like compared to the other things that we're doing. But if they are for you, be careful, because then if you think that your fun comes from external things like institutions, like external validation, or like external substances, those things will all have a hold over you. That's why meat, fish, wine, drugs, sex, these things are great for the Virabhava practitioner, but for most people they will probably become hindrances. You might end up becoming a drug addict. That's the danger. The danger of dabbling with Vāmācāra, if you are a Pashubhava type, is that it's very easy to become addicted. You know, and if you don't know the right mantras, it will like ruin your health, arguably. It's very deleterious for consciousness. It will make you very foggy. Like you'll just like have hangovers and your mind will be addled, and like you won't get the pristine clarity of consciousness because you're not using those substances either in their right portions or in their right settings or contexts or applications. So that's why Pashubhava practitioners, it's like there's like a lot of secrecy around the Virabhava type things. The Kaulachara, Vāmācāra is very secret, keeps out the Pashubhava type. It's like that discernment is really important, right? We just teach freely on the internet, offering this to everyone, everywhere, which puts a lot of responsibility on the individual to decide whether or not they should engage in something. And plus, you're all fucking adults. Like, just for once, try to behave like that, you know? I'm just shocked. I'm like, girl, you're like 48. Why are you pretending like I'm your dad and asking me if I can or cannot do something? Like, I'm not going to tell you whether you can or cannot drink or can or cannot smoke. And if I'm smoking in front of you and you're like, oh my God, dad is smoking, I should also smoke. And then you get addicted to cigarettes, it's not my fault. You're a fucking adult and so am I. We're making adult choices here. Like, check yourself before you wreck yourself. I can jump off a cliff and I can fly. Watch me. But you don't try to jump off the same cliff if you don't have the same wings. Red Bull gives you wings. This lecture brought to you by... Dude, I have hubris. It's not hubris. I once met a parkour guy. I learned a lot from him, actually. You are like, if you hang out with me, you're gonna see me do some crazy shit. Like, I'm just going to put that out there. People get so disappointed. They see me on the internet. They're like, oh, this guy is so holy. Then they come to a retreat with me and they're like, what the fuck? So let me just like give you a disclaimer right now. You're going to see me do some crazy shit, right? I'm sorry, because I can. I'm just going to put that out there. And it's not hubris to say so, because once I saw this parkour guy and he was jumping between these two really, these buildings really far apart, right? And he jumped from one building to another. And I was like talking to him about it. I was like, dude, like, fuck, that was awesome. It was like if he missed the ledge, it's quite the fall. So I'm like, wow, you probably take a lot of risk in your life. And he said something that fucking floored me and made me realize a lot, actually. He said, I'm not taking any risks. He said, I know myself and I know what I can do. And I know that I can clear that distance. I've practiced it thousands of times before. So when I jump from that building to this building, I'm not actually taking a risk because I know what I'm capable of at any given time. And so that's when I realized, I'm like, yeah, I'm confident. I know what I can do. You might not be able to. So some people who can't look at me and they're like, oh, he's fucked. No, you're fucked. If you try to jump from that building to that building, you will fall and kill yourself. I've been jumping, honey, for years. I'm still fucking here, right? Like, I'm still fucking here. And one day, maybe I won't be. Maybe I will pay for my hubris. But that doesn't sound like a you problem, dear. So leave me alone. My point here is just to say, you can't really judge except internally. And so therefore you must be discerning internally. If you participate in some practices and they're not for you, if you realize you're having a deleterious and not helpful effect, you must have your own discernment to move away from them, right? So move towards what strengthens you and move away from what harms you, and it's up to you to decide. But if you need me to tell you, Shaiva Siddhanta, baby. Back to the institution, I am not that. Like, I'm not going to give you rules, I'm not going to give you regulations. I will model before you the life, and we'll worship together. But be careful, if it's not working for you, you have to leave. And that's the thing, it's like in the Shaiva Siddhanta, if you cannot trust yourself, you can, in the institutional right-hand path of Tantra, trust someone else, and they will play that role for you. They will tell you, no onions, no garlic. I won't give you Diksha unless you can prove to me that you can be vegetarian for 6 months. So being vegetarian, being free of onions and garlic, that's very important. And so for such a person, like, that will be an achievement, to like get off meat or stop eating onions and garlic. That will be an achievement, because that person might be very addictive, naturally. So there's a dichotomy here. I hope I can point out the fact that like Vira Bhava practitioners might be pishachas to Dakshina Marga practitioners, and vice versa. The Dakshina Marga practitioners might look like puritanical to the Vira Bhava practitioners. Both are right. Both are valid. They're just different. We just have different dispositions. But it's, again, still institutional. Like the Vira Bhava practitioner is not more internal, I don't think, than the Pashu Bhava. And the Pashu Bhava is not more external than the Vira Bhava. This is my amendation from last week's lecture. I think I was reflecting on it just now, like 10 minutes ago in the middle of this lecture. And it occurred to me that, like, I might have presented it last week as if the Vira Bhava was like more internalized and the Pashu Bhava type was more externalized. I might have presented Rajas as being more internal and Tamas as being more external. No. I hope last week I presented Sattva as interiority and Tamas externality. That's like what I said last week. Rajas is that which flows between them. So both the Pashu Bhava and the Vira Bhava are obviously Rajasic because they're both expending energy. It's just that one is expending energy towards the institution and one is expending energy away from the institution, but still defined by the institution. Do you see? If there was no rule, if there was no rule book, then you couldn't create your transgressive manuals. So they're still in dialogue with one another. So this is the question I want to put to you, and then we'll come to a close. If if ichcha or desire is the way to reconcile the seeming dichotomy between jnana, by DS. Thank you so much. Oh my god, it's 6:37 on a Tuesday morning in the Netherlands. It's time to go to work. Jaima. Yeah, that's too how I do things. Just stay up all night and just go to work. Jaima. Okay, so if Ichcha Shakti, if desire is the way to reconcile jnana and kriya, knowledge and action, or rather meditation or inquiry and ritual or ceremonials, what is the way to reconcile Pashu Bhava, which I was saying is kind of tamasic, with Vira Bhava, which I was saying was kind of rajasic? So using that Sankhyan model of the three gunas, It's sattva, right? Like sattva is the reconciliation of rajas and tamas. It's the secret third thing that reconciles the duality. So notice, I'm not actually presenting trinities here. I'm presenting dualities with the third thing as a reconciling feature. That's the strategy I'm taking. So what would that look like for the pashu-bhava, vira-bhava thing? What bhava reconciles the pashu and vira-bhava? What do you think? The divya bhava, exactly, Bhairavi. It's the sattva tattva, or the sattva guna, I would say. And that sattva guna is manifest most in the divya bhava practitioner, which is arguably our goal. Whether we are the pashu bhava type, which is institutional oriented type, external authority oriented type, like rules and regulations, purity, impurity oriented type, or we are the transgressive, anti-authoritarian, unorthodox, kind of apostate, like pishacha, whichever one we are, we're both headed towards the same goal. Either sequentially, the pashu becomes the vira, becomes the divya, or independently, the pashu and the vira both converge in the divya. The goal is the divya, actually, I would say. Why? Because I'm going to, and you know, you can think of this in another way too. You can say Divya, Pashu and Vira are all three separate paths, but I'm just going to present it in this way if you don't mind. The Divya is a reconciliation of the Pashu and of the Vira in this sense. Once you get to Divya Bhava, you realize that it doesn't actually matter whether something is external or internal, because the idea of external and internal are still actually contingent upon the body and the mind. So now I'm going to introduce another duality. Tamas has to do with the body, and the body necessarily is contiguous with the world. So institutions, external forces of authority, I'm going to call the body. I'm just going to include them in the body. So the body means this physical corporeal body and the physical corporeal world, which is given to me through my body. But then there's an interior private world called the mind. That might be more rajasic, it's more dynamic, it's more mercurial. But there's a secret third thing. And that, my friends, is awareness. Awareness is neither the body nor the mind. Now I want to close with the most important thing I could possibly say. Divya Bhava is available to us in literally the next 15 minutes. At least next 15 minutes. If we can just tune to what is going to be said now. This is important. Everything we've said up to now is in the mind. It's a thought. It's all just a discussion about history, about culture, about socio-political considerations that affect our tradition. We're presenting mental models, maps, frameworks, all of that. It's all in the mind. This is an intellectual activity. Yes? Let me make one more point here. The Pashu-bhava will not be interested in this type of thing. A Pashu-bhava practitioner says, dude, stop talking, give me a ritual I can do. Do you know what I mean? They're action-oriented, which is, again, awesome. Not only action-oriented, they're externally oriented. So they want a ritual that they can do. They want a puja. They want rules and regulations. I've given lectures, and at the end of the lecture, I've had people ask me, okay, but what do I do now, though? And I'm like, that's not really what the lecture was about. You know, or like they'll be like, okay, but like, what's the rule then? What's the regulation? What's the practice? Like, I was like, that was the practice, bro. I'm like, I'm not teaching a practice. I'm practicing right now. Right? And that's a Vira Bhava view, which is like, no, what we're doing is called Shakta-upaya. It's Vikalpa Samskara. We're rehearsing thought constructs. All of that is inherently valuable. That's what we just did for the last 2 or so hours. Now, I want to move away a bit from both ritualism and from intellectualism. In other words, I want to move away from Anava-upaya and from Shakta-upaya. Or, I'll put it another way, I want to move away from tamas and from rajas. Everything up to now has been very rajasic. I want to move towards sattva. I want to move towards shambhava upaya. I'm going to move towards divya bhava. Okay? So try to catch this. It's so subtle, yet so obvious, so immediate, and so beautiful. And I'll close off with Matangi and art and the kind of Rasa vada thing in just a bit. But for now, check this out. To this body is presented a physical, corporeal world. The body is sustained by transacting with that corporeal world, traditionally through food. So food is considered like nourishment for the body. Food has a mental component to it. So when I eat food, the food that goes into my body nourishes my body, but it also affects the mind. Yes? Now there's also a different kind of food for just the mind, which hopefully we've had a feast of in the past 2 hours. That's mental food. That's the mental world, and you are nourished as a mind by ideas. So just as the body eats food and is sustained by corporeality, the mind eats ideas and is sustained by this imaginal space, or what do you call it, mentality. So corporeality is called tamas, mentality is called rajas. Our experience of samsara is an experience of both corporeality and mentality. And one feels more externalized and one feels more internalized. But wait, they're actually both external. One is just subtly external, the other is grossly external. But they're both external. External to what? To consciousness. So the third thing is this witnessing presence that is not at all any of the thoughts that it illumines, nor is it any of the sensations or physical things that it illumines. Imagine it's like a light and it's shining, and in that light is presented to you all your thoughts, all your dreams, all your physical sensations, all like a vista of experience opening before you. Now you are that light. So it's a light because it shines, because it reveals, because it illumines, but it's not at all a light. It is consciousness, it is awareness, it is what you are. But it is what you are distinct from the mind and from the body. Right? So just feel that. Just, you can feel into this. Are you aware of the world? Yes. You can see all the objects around you. You can smell things. You can taste things. You can see, feel, hear. All of that is the body. It's all tamas. It's all just a physical, corporeal experience. Now notice, 2 + 2 = 4. What did I have for dinner? What type of bowl are we going to smoke to celebrate 420, indica or sativa? Like, these are all thoughts, right? They're there. Just notice, I'm aware of them. Now, as you become aware of the world around you, which I'm going to call the body, and as you become aware of the body, which is part of the world, and which the world is a part of, you become aware of the mind. Notice this, you are distinct from them. You're something other than the body and mind. But notice also that they are not distinct from you. So while I am different from the body / world, while I am different from the mind, I don't actually experience the mind, body, or world as being outside of me. In fact, I experience them as being within the light of awareness. So now notice, I am not this light that shines. I am like a movie screen in which is projected the totality of the movie. So feel yourself now, not just here looking out. Feel yourself to be the field. Feel that you are everywhere now, saturating the guitar, saturating the body, saturating every thought. And yet, like gold is not the ornaments, you are something other than all this also. And yet, like the ornaments are nothing but gold, this is nothing other than you. This is where it gets really interesting. None of this is new, but this is where it gets really interesting. As you become aware, and you're only ever aware, you're never not aware, notice there's this inherent self-reflexive function. Like awareness is inherently self-aware. Just notice what that feels like. You know, there's no need to close your eyes because that doesn't add or detract anything from awareness. Haven't you noticed? Like, it's like you're trying to like close your eyes and be like, okay, I'm going to step back from the world, step back from the body. Why? Like you're just as aware with your eyes open as with your eyes closed. Usually people become very quiet. Why? Like, why did you close your eyes and become quiet? What's the point? Like, you're just as aware talking with your eyes open as you are quiet with your eyes closed. But I'm going to say this, because you're in bliss. There's something about bliss that makes you want to close your eyes and sigh and just be quiet. After an orgasm, after a delicious piece of ice cream, is it a piece of ice cream? I don't know. After some ice cream, after listening to a wonderful piece of music, don't you just feel like in these powerful moments of art, in these powerful moments of orgasm, and these powerful moments of, I don't know, grief, like in these intense moments, there comes suddenly from time to time this tendency to close your eyes, to exhale, and to just be, right? That being is inherently dynamic because being is inherently self-aware. This is sex. we use a metaphor here. Lord Shiva is being, and he is being fucked. But what is that that's fucking him, that's on top of him and riding him? His self-awareness, vimarsha, shakti. The reason why we use this metaphor is because if you can just relax now and be, you'll notice that it's inherently sweet. Right? There's something about just being. And when I say this, I mean separate from body, separate from thought. That's why samadhi is just glorious. That's why like you get such ecstasy if you have this 5-MeO DMT experience and the world is deleted. You know, like in that moment when you're not experiencing anything but yourself and you're always only ever experiencing yourself, there's a flood of bliss. Anandavardhana, we call it. The Anandavardhana, the flood of bliss that is just... It's like people have this mystical experience, this near-death experience where they just have this bliss, or they have DMT and they're like, oh, I mean, like, what's that guy, Immortal Ankh? What's his name? He's the guy who's trying to live forever. Somebody help me out here. What's his name? The guy, he like has a Netflix special. He's a really sweet guy. I really like him. I've never met him though, but anyway, he just did DMT. It's like a whole thing. He just like had a clinical DMT thing, and he thank you, Brian Johnson. Yes. Listen to Brian Johnson's review of DMT. It's actually really funny if you know Brian Johnson, right? Like, this is like a guy who, like, you have to watch the documentary and then you'll see why this is so dramatic. He says it's the singular greatest experience that he's ever had in his life. Something around that line. He's like saying, he's just like, I have never, you know, when you look at him, you'll see that he had this experience that I'm talking about right now, which you can have right now, right here. Because we're saying it's an experience of awareness as awareness. It's Anandavardhana, a flood of bliss. See, nothing is required for it. It's just inherent to your being. This we call Sattva. Like, we define Sattva as that state when the mind is most quiescent, most calm, and most luminous. In fact, I should say, most transparent. Anahata screamed as a seagull after I heard him describing it. Girl, that's so perfect. That's exactly... I'm just so happy to think about Anahata screaming like a seagull. I'm like, yes, may all the Dakinis and Bhairavis scream and squawk. It makes me so happy. Anyway, just notice this. Right now, when my mind is calm or when my body is still, I become even more susceptible to this bliss. So Sattva feels good. There's a sukha to Sattva. Rajas can feel agitated, right? Tamas can feel stagnant or heavy. That's the psychological feeling. Tamas, heavy. Rajas, agitated. But Sattva is calm, is still. And in that calm stillness, there's luminosity, right? And I would say, Kit, you are nothing. You're vyoma vyapine, vyoma rupaya, you're void. And this void nature, you can't get it, you are it. So what do you give up for it? Now this is why, I'm going to say this is why the Dakshina Marga is so helpful. Because again, it's all about Sattva maxing. And the Sattva maxing there is obvious, you guys. They tell you to sit still. They tell you to be fucking quiet. Be quiet, sit still, and don't fucking leave the garlic alone. Do you have to put so much garlic on your pizza? Don't eat garlic, don't eat onions, don't eat meat. These things are rajasic. Wake up really early. You guys, this is a great strategy. I'm telling you, like, the Dakshina Marga is awesome. Like, for years and years and years of my life, I'm just doing this, waking up before like 5 in the morning, like sitting there, and like all that's so good. Because, you know, when you're vegetarian, when you're avoiding these foods, and I didn't drink alcohol for 12 years, like more or less, like when you... hard to recognize myself these days. But like, dude, I didn't touch alcohol for like years and years and years and years. Like, it really does create sattva. It creates a lot of sattva. And then, you know, you're able to sit for long periods of time when the body is calm, when the mind is calm. You just feel blissful. What is that? This is important, you guys. It's not the sattva. This bliss, we're going to call it sattva, but be careful. It's not actually sattva, because sattva is a particular configuration of the body and mind that reflects your real face. If you mistake the face in the clean mirror for your real face, you're going to be in trouble, because the mirror won't always be clean. And you know what's going to happen? If you mistake the face in the mirror for your real face, you're going to become tamasically and rajasically fixated on sattva. This is what I call the degeneration of sattva. If you practice Dakshina Marga and you get a glimpse, if you become a born again and again and again and again and again and again Hindu, you know that joke? The Christian said I'm a born again Christian and the Hindu said I'm a born again and again and again and again Hindu. Anyway, if you experience God through the Dakshina Marga and it's a sattva kind of experience, you become fanatic. You become puritanical because it's so good that you want to just like keep it. You're going to be like, if I eat garlic or onion, it's going to ruin the bliss of God. If I wake up late, it's going to fuck up my high. If I don't meditate, if I touch alcohol, if I touch meat. In other words, you become a fearful little bitch. Sorry to say it that way, but you just become scared of meat and scared of onions and scared of garlic and scared of wine and scared of everything. You're scared of life because life is tamasic where corporeality is concerned and mind is rajasic. You see? So rajas and tamas will fuck with your sattva high. Because what you have is a reflection which is very helpful. What you fail to do is recognize that the reflection is a reflection. That's the problem. And that's why Dakshina Marga easily degenerates into, yeah, I know, Italians are fucked. Sorry, you guys. That's why I come to the Vāmācāra. You guys will have red wine and lots of garlic. We're going to be fine. I'm kidding. It's not racial like that because there are a lot of people in the world who just could benefit a lot from Dakshina Marga, you know. I was starting to be harmed by Dakshina Marga. In that, I was starting to fetishize sattva. And I was seeing in myself all my aversion to those things that would fuck up my high. I was bound by my habit of meditation, as the Ashtavakra Gita said so beautifully. Now, the Vāmācāra, the Kaulachara, is not at all against sattva. In fact, it's an attempt to show that what sattva reveals is equally available even in highly rajasic and tamasic states. So that's why earlier I said a very Vāmācāra thing. Why do you guys close your eyes? What, is God so cheap that she's only found behind closed eyelids? To use a Ramakrishnaism, did you take your God and put him in the prison of samadhi and throw away the keys? Is God so powerless that she can't be present here and now with eyes open? Is God only there in silence? What, she's negated by sound? She's stillness negated by movement? No. God should be equally present in stillness as in movement, in silence as in sound. So now, in this moment, eyes open or eyes closed, I'm equally aware. Talking or silent, I am equally aware. What is required of you now is you subtly, and this cannot be explained as it were, but you subtly now just turn away from the externals. I put it another way. Turn away from the content of your experience and rest in the context. Just rest. If you hold this for a while, Nishala Buddhim, the mind unmoving in the Nirakara Nirashraya, in the thoughtless Nirvikalpa Gochara, the field of non-conceptual awareness, you'll start to feel a peace, which then sweetens into a kind of pleasure, which sweetens into a kind of joy, which becomes a kind of ecstasy, and then come this Anandavardhana. Oh, Jayama. Don't worry, it'll be recorded, Jayama. And who cares? You're already that. But you're going to feel a bliss. An unbelievable bliss. Orgasms pale in comparison to this Anandavardhana, right? Anandavardhana. Now, this Anandavardhana is inherent to consciousness. It's just that the sattvic experience, that sattvic mind just revealed it. You know, our claim is that you can get a sattvic mind through the satiety of any pleasure. So like, say I want to eat chocolate cake. If I eat chocolate cake, the moment that I taste the chocolate cake, the beauty of the chocolate cake is actually kind of sattvic. The tamas and rajas might come before the chocolate cake. I want to eat chocolate cake. The tamas is like, I'm addicted to chocolate cake. The rajas is, I'm agitated until I get the chocolate cake. After the chocolate cake, I might be tamasic and rajasic again. I may be like, oh my god, where's my next slice? Or, oh my god, I can't believe I ate the chocolate cake. I'm so guilty and ashamed. Or, oh my god, I feel so heavy and sleepy. Like, okay, tamas and rajas after, tamas and rajas before. But when you're actually eating the damn thing, and very few of us know how to savor and appreciate charvana, savoring, when we eat it, in that moment when you're getting your hit, there's sattva actually. Any experience of beauty is an experience of bliss. And any experience of bliss is sattvic. This is important. All bliss is sattvic. When this sattva is experienced in a tamasic context, it's dull. When it's experienced in a rajasic context, it's a bit shaky and unstable. When it's experienced in a purely sattvic context, it's a bit clearer. Just like a mirror that is either opaque, clouded over, or purely transparent. Not transparent, sorry, reflecting. So these are three states of mind and body, right? The same bliss, which is what you are actually, you are bliss. That same bliss when experienced in this like kind of agitated rajas context will feel like one thing. In this tamasic context will feel like another thing. In the sattvic context will also feel like a third thing, right? But it's the bliss that you are. So when you are eating something delicious and it gives you bliss, that's the sattvic experience. The very fact that you're feeling bliss means you're tasting your own bliss. Do you see? This is important because if you're doing substances, if you're drinking wine and eating like chocolate cake and meat and fish and having sex and doing drugs, like if you're doing that, but you're failing to see what those things are teaching you, you'll just be an addict. Which is also fun. I mean, like, why not? That's one thing to do in this life. Who's to, But this becomes productive if every time you eat meat, drink wine, eat fish, engage in sexual activity, if every time you do a drug or whatever, like, and today's 420, whenever you're in bliss, if you feel that to be ananda, and more importantly, if you recognize that to be your own ananda, what you're doing is you're cultivating sattva through impurity. You know what I'm saying? It's like you can cultivate sattva through purity. In other words, you can avoid onions and garlic, you can avoid meat, you can avoid fish, you can wake up early in the morning, you can do all of that and you can cultivate sattva. But you can also cultivate sattva if you enjoy beautiful experiences, which can sometimes be in the right-hand path transgressive. Like it's not for transgressing the rules, like that we eat fish and meat and wine. It could be. That's a valuable practice too. But Abhinavagupta in chapter 4 of the Tantra Sara and Tantra Loka, he says, there's no such thing as purity or impurity. It's very important that he proves that. He goes to great lengths to show that purity and impurity do not inhere in foods, right? They don't inhere in substances. Like wine is not inherently impure. That's why, by the way, when people see me drink, they freak out because they can't drink. That's the point I'm making. It's like if they drink, they become alcoholics. So they look at me and they're like, he must be an alcoholic. I'm like, that's up to me to decide. Do you know, like when I decide I have a problem, then I have a problem. But more importantly, it sounds like right now it's a you problem. But notice, it's because it's not the alcohol. Like, there are many people who drink who have no problem drinking. Some people drink a little bit and they're fucked. Like, it's really the person and their relationship to the substance, which is not even about the substance, but about their past and about their mind. Are they drinking to escape a thing? You know, it's a sad thing, but I was just say, like, I have an ex, and it was a really sad thing because, like, I'll pause the recording and tell you about it later. It's like just for her privacy, I won't say it on record, but then later I'll tell you about it. It's a very beautiful story, actually, very touching, and taught me a lot about substance abuse. Back when I was playing music in a rock band and all that, like I learned a lot in those times about substances and abuse and what that looks like, and I'll talk about it in just a bit. But right now I just want to say it's not the substance, it's the person. It's not even the person, it's their psychology. It's like their upbringing, it's their relationship to things and to pleasure and to the body and to life. So if a person is doing a substance to run away from a problem, that's different from when a person is doing a substance to actually celebrate and appreciate the bliss that it brings. So in one context, you're not even getting bliss, you're getting relief. Do you know? If a substance is giving you relief, you're not yet at the stage where you can enjoy it. But if the substance is giving you bliss, it's arguably adding, not subtracting. But here, what it's adding is it's giving you, in that moment at least, while you're savoring the substance, a mirror. So Abhinavagupta in chapter 4 of Tantra Sara, he says the reason why we offer beautiful pastes, and we offer beautiful flowers, and we offer wine. He uses the word wine as a kind of stand-in for all the Panchamakaras and all the pleasurable things that we do in Vāmācāra. The reason we offer it is because when experiencing beauty, the mind is more likely to repose in awareness. You know, like you're more likely to rest. You're more likely to relax. When you're eating something beautiful, you relax. When you're seeing something beautiful, you relax. When you listen to beautiful music, you relax. Haven't you noticed? There's something about music, art, poetry, there's something about a theater production, there's something about an orgasm, there's something about food, there's something about wine, there's something about drugs that helps us relax. Right? That's why we like it so much. And we say, anytime you're relaxed, anytime you're rested, anytime you're in bliss, anytime you're satiated, it's a sattvic state. So you can cultivate sattva in both ways. You can develop a very disciplined practice and wake up early in the morning. You can avoid onions and garlic and all sorts of substances, and you can cultivate sattva that way. Or, yes, and also, it doesn't have to be either or. It can be, and you can enjoy a piece of chocolate cake or an orgasm or drink some wine or like do a drug, like it's 420, smoke a bowl, whatever. But this is the key, right? When you are experiencing this, Hennessy, enjoy responsibly. But it's like in this moment, when you're enjoying it, you have to remember always that it's yourself that you are enjoying, which in this moment, in this just brief sattvic period of time of rest and relaxation and repose, this is when you can get it. like that reflection. And then you stay with that even after the pleasure has gone away. See, both paths culminate in Divya Bhava. What is Divya Bhava? Neither caring for discipline nor for indulgence. Neither the left nor the right matter to you anymore. Both are interchangeable. In fact, both paths fall away. A Divya Bhava practitioner, the reason I didn't talk about it last week is because it's not an upaya. It's Shambhava upaya. You can't really talk about it like you talk about Shakta upaya or Anava upaya. In the Shambhava upaya mode, in the Divya upaya mode, Divya Bhava mode, you just are it. There's no vibhava necessary. Anything can elicit a spontaneous resting or recognition of self. And nothing is needed to elicit it. You're stabilized in it. You are nischala, unmovingly established in the Nirākāra, Nirāshraya. You see? That's why, at this point, I don't mind just saying, I don't care about what anybody will have to say, because my experience is my experience. And it doesn't change. Like, my experience of joy is intact in any life situation, and it's been true. Like, I just can't deny it. Like, since a certain point, it's just that this feeling of being myself has never left me yet. It's still there. Does it come and go? Does it fluctuate? Yes. And what I realize is that there are no rules that can hold me anymore. And so after rigorous experimentation, I'm realizing I don't need to experiment that much anymore. There was a period of time where I had to really hardcore put this to the test. Once you feel it in the bindu, I want to run as far away from the bindu as possible. I want to go to the bhupara and see if it will follow me there. I stopped meditating. I stopped doing puja. I consumed as many substances and as much meat as I could. I tried my best to move as far away from spirituality as possible. This fucking feeling is still there. And that means that it's not about the bhupara or the bindu. It's inherent to awareness. Now, as a closing note, I just want to say something about Mātangī. So Sattva, I'm reclaiming for Vāmācāra. You see, I'm not saying Vāmācāra is about Rajas and Tamas and Dakshina Marga is about Sattva. That's some Dakshina Marga propaganda, folks. They're trying to say, oh, we're really sattvic because we don't eat onions and garlic. Hare, you are as tamasic as anybody else because you're addicted to meditation. Yeah, you can be addicted to heroin, but you can also be addicted to meditation. A heroin addict who doesn't get heroin will freak out. A meditation addict, speaking from experience, who doesn't get to meditate in the morning will freak the fuck out. You know, there was a time when if my ex would hurt my feelings, I would go off to a room and just sit and meditate for 4 hours. How is that different from substance abuse? I was using meditation to opt out of the difficult emotions that were arising in my heart. It was just pure escapism. I had just at age 16 figured out a way to concentrate. That's it. When I was young, practiced really, really hard to develop the power of concentration, got hopelessly addicted to it because of the bliss of that flow state, and then used it the way you would use marijuana or alcohol to avoid dealing with the difficult things in my life. Meditation is as much a substance as anything else. And the tamasic need to perpetuate a habit or a pattern because you think you need it, that's externalization. Even meditation, notice, is externalization because I just now said the mind and body are as external to consciousness in one sense. So if I'm looking for something in the mind, like a concept or like a mental practice, meditation is in the mind, by the way, it's a concentration practice. It's about the mind. If I'm looking to meditation or to a mental state of ecstasy, which I get through a drug or through some kind of internal practice, like Wim Hof, ice bath, sauna, it's not that different. Don't you notice when people get off drugs, they just get into the sauna, Wim Hof world or whatever? It's now they're not doing ecstasy anymore, but they're doing something even weirder, which is probably even worse for your health. I think in the long run, we're all going to discover that you get aneurysms and shit by going from cold to hot. I'm hurry, just give me another bag at this point. I can rip through a bag or I can fucking jump into cold water 8 times. I'm it's the same fucking thing. Do you see? It's the same fucking thing, and it's tamasic. It's tamasic to depend on something outside of yourself for joy. It's rajasic to be agitated when you don't get it. That's the same with the pashus as it is with the viras. Do you see? If that's the case, then Divya Bhava is that attitude that says any external event is not actually external, it's internal, and I need nothing to be a certain way. I don't need to meditate, I'm also not averse to meditation. I don't need any substances, I'm not averse to substances. Nothing is better or worse, it's neither either or, it's perfectly non-dual. Do you see? Inside and outside feel the same. Eyes open and eyes closed feel the same. Because now you're no longer in the body, which a Pashu Bhava is. The definition of Pashu is a bound animal. They're animalistically attached to the outside world. Nor are you in the mind, which is where the Vira Bhava practitioner is. You see, a child is in their body more than in their mind. An adolescent is in their mind more than in their body. An adult, a true adult in the Tāntrik sense, is in awareness. just resting in awareness. Both body and mind appear and disappear in that awareness, and that awareness is inherently blissful. So this is why Ramakrishna is cheerful all the time. He can't help it. He's blissed the fuck out. And every zero that you add is being added after the one, because he has the one, you see. So every zero after that only makes it better. So there's no reason why you wouldn't engage with life. Nothing about life can take away from this. And nothing about life can add to this. So anything that goes, you say, bye, it was fun. You know, some people think this is psychopathic of me. It's kind of sad, actually. Like, there are people who have come and gone in my life, and I'm like, good luck, I'll miss you. But like, I'm the same. I'm the same whether that person is here or not. And there are things that come into your life that you'd be like, hi. It's great. It doesn't add onto me, and nothing that leaves takes from me. Right? Because we're here right now, and in this is all my joy. And so why would I reject? Why would I hold? That's the Divya Bhava. Why would I reject institution? Why would I accept institution? I would do both, actually, because 2 zeros are better than 1 zero, and 1 zero is better than no zeros. You see, so it's a life-affirming sort of thing. And therefore, when we come to Mātangī, it's important that she represents this Raja Shyamala, Raja like Shyamala in the sense of like art-oriented, aesthetically oriented deity, because what this represents, it's a mascot, an icon for this philosophical idea that any artistic experience, including the difficult experiences like fear or anger, what makes it artistic, this is Abhinavagupta's idea, is your ability to rest in yourself and hold space for that experience without it necessarily moving you into action or into thought. Right? If you move into action, it's tamas. If you move into thought, it's rajas. But if you can just be present and experience the emotion, do you see how art itself is the creation of sattva around what would otherwise be rajas or tamas? So say raudra, anger, is different from krodha. Because if I am angry, I will go and do something. I'll shout, I'll post on Instagram, like I did today. Or I will, I don't know, run away or something. That's tamasic. Or I will think. Even if I don't act, thinking is a kind of action, right? You know, so if I didn't rant on Instagram today, you think I would have just, like, not thought about it? I would have probably sat there and been like, to Vivekananda or not to Vivekananda? Even that is a kind of thought. Even that is rajasic. So the tamasic action, the rajasic action, motivated by anger, that's called krodha. But if I watch a movie, and in that movie there's some angry scene or something, and I feel anger arising in me because I'm sympathetically identifying with the character, notice, if I can stay fully present with that art experience, I don't think of my own thoughts. It's an impersonal experience. I'm watching somebody on screen experience something and I'm feeling angry on their behalf. It's not my problem, so I'm not thinking my own thoughts. Nor am I getting up and running to the screen and trying to fight with whoever's on the screen. There was like a cute thing where a wrestler, he was fighting or something, his mom was there and he was getting clobbered and his mom came onto the stage and protected him, just like out of the instinct of the mother. It was so cute. And sometimes in India, people get very invested in the movie. So when the hero is being beaten up or something on screen, they rush towards the screen and try to help him. I think it's so cute. But like, you know, if you're in an art experience and you're like watching the film or whatever, you don't get up off your seat. You're like still. Nor do you think thoughts. Do you see how this is meditation? Art, the perfect experience of a piece of music or a piece of theater or some kind of film, even eating good food and the experience of sex, like real sex. The problem is when we have sex, we're usually fantasizing or we're like nervous, we're like in our heads, you know, or we're in our bodies. Do you know what I mean? While we're giving head, we're in our head. Is this good? You know, or like even the body, it's like we're not holding that in this artistic way of like stepping back and holding both. We have so many hang-ups, but the same hang-ups we have around sex, we have around food. You know, we're so afraid of new foods. Or when we eat foods, we're like not able to like really taste it because we have all these like, this flavor I don't like or something, you know. And so too with art. We're not very open to art because we're agitated. Again, there's something else I wanted to say, but I want it to be off record. And because Zoom updated, I have no idea how to pause the recording anymore. So that's for the better. So let me finish this talk. I'm just about to finish. And then let's open the floor for some discussion, and then I'll tell you these 2 stories that I wanted to tell you off the record. But this is my second story about art. So anyway, when you're watching a movie and you're just present with the movie. You don't think thoughts. You're very still. That's Sattva. Abhinavagupta calls that Shanta Rasa. Shanta Rasa is that sattvic container which allows for an artistic experience. If you don't have that sattvic container, you won't have rasa. In other words, you won't have an aesthetic experience. You'll just have an experience, which is externalizing. But the thing about art is it's an experience maybe triggered by something external, like a movie screen, but it's internalizing. Do you see? Is that beautiful? Art is some kind of external experience, but like unlike other external experiences that tend to further externalize you, art is an external experience that tends to internalize you. And in the best case scenario, internalize you as consciousness, not as mind. So when you're having an artistic experience, we call that rasa. And notice, you don't just get rasa from the positive emotions, like compassion, like happiness. Matangi therefore represents the ability to find art and beauty and poetry and meaning in the impure or in the detestable or in the rejected. Therefore, Kali, Bhairav, Chinnamastaka, Matangi. This is a different kind of spirituality than you might be used to. Saraswati represents art, but she's representing what seems to be a kind of cultured, refined, beautiful in a conventional way sort of art. Matangi is green, like fucking Shrek. And more importantly, she's got crazy hair and she's like holding a skull and a sword, and she's described as a 16-year-old woman. Samashinam Shavoparim Raktambara Parichadam. You know, like the mantra for Matangi, she's wearing red clothes. She has red ornaments. Gunjahara Vibhushitam. She's dressed in Gunjahara. Shodha Shabdam Cha Yuvatim. She's sweaty. She's sweaty, and she's a young, beautiful woman. By the way, her sweat might imply like sexual activity. So she's often described in erotic terms. She's got like beautiful breasts, Pidonata Payodharam. She's got a beautiful waist, and she's like often described as like blushing or like sweating or like in this kind of like, you know, like sexy pose. But also she's holding a skull and a sword. And so she's also scary, and she's got wild hair, and yeah, the sweat can sometimes imply like disgusting, like she's unshowered and unclean, she's wearing dirty clothes, and she's sitting on a corpse, Shavo Parim, and she's in the smashan, Samashinam Shavo Parim. So all of this is our dark spirituality. We're saying all these emotions that we reject, they're actually better than the emotions that we accept. It's aversion, it's fear, it's pain, it's grief. These are the things that are more likely to create an emotional highlight, an intense experience that catapults you beyond the body and mind. So it's dramatic. And we say Vāmācāra is actually not about worldliness and the desire for pleasure, because a lot of Vāmācāra, a lot of Kaulācāra, notice we fetishize the very opposite of what people call pleasure. You know, today you think you'll be having sex. Tomorrow you'll be sitting on a dead guy. You'll be filling his mouth with oil and sticking a wick in there and hoping to God he doesn't wake up while you do your sadhana. Do you know? It's not what people think it is. People think it's indulgence, right? It's not, because the same things that will be indulgent to one person is horrific to another, and vice versa. But in the Vāmācāra, the Kaulācāra, when you worship Matangini, you're saying, I'm going to be open to the artistic experience of the entire spectrum of life. Nothing is considered heretical or impure to me. So if you want to do a Matangi sadhana, go to the movie theater and watch literally anything. Watch a foreign film. Go to AMC Screen Unscreen or something. There's a thing that they do on Mondays at AMC here in LA where like Screen Unseen, I think it's called, where you don't know what movie you're going to see. It's like a blind box, and you go in and you just show you a movie, and it's great because there's a film out right now. It's called Exit 8 or whatever. It's a Japanese film, and yesterday Kirana and I were going to go and see it, but then we decided to come home and listen to records anyway. But like if we went to see it, it'd be great because we know nothing about it. So that's a wonderful practice. Without knowing anything about a movie, just go to the theater and watch whatever. Like listen to like music and you don't even know what it is, get a record from like the blind box or something like that. That's Matangi, you know, because you're saying I'm going to be open to a new experience and I have no notion whether it's pure or impure, whether it's for me or not for me. I'm just going to like be open to it. You see, so that's Vāmācāra. Kaulācāra is this radical embrace of the total spectrum of life, but notice it leans into Divya-bhava. Because Divya-bhava is what is required actually to be able to do this meaningfully. It's the Shanta Rasa that you cultivate through developing Sattva. It's that which allows you to aestheticize things like grief. So when I gave lectures like how to turn pain and suffering into ecstasy, the lecture called Ma Kali's Bowl of Blood, how to succeed at Tantra and the worship of the terrible, these are all my best lectures. These are our audience, these are their favorite lectures because this is my specialty. Because I am a Kali Bhakta. In other words, my life mission is to eat flesh and drink blood, which is a poetic and allegorical, sometimes literal, way of saying, I want to lick urinals and eat shit. In other words, I'm saying I want to be at that state where the fire of consciousness can burn into ash anything that you put into it. In other words, I'm saying I want to be open to life. And primarily, I want to practice with those things that are hardest to practice with. Grief, pain, heartbreak. So I made a deity of all of those things. And every day when I offer flowers at the feet of this terrible goddess whose image inspires fear, I know that when fear and horror comes, I'm only face to face with my deity. So instead of reacting with fear and with aversion, I react with openness and with peace, with stillness and with silence. That's called śānta-bhāva. And within that Shaiva world of aesthetics, within the Shiva that is my śānta-bhāva, that gives her room to dance. So I'm not saying you have to be Saraswati. I'm saying come as Matangi. Like, girl, put your records on. Like, tell me your favorite song. Go ahead and let your hair down. When you say that, when you can say that to Saraswati, she becomes Matangi. When you can go outside of your institution and enjoy spirituality in the smashan like you did in the temple, that's Vāmācāra. And when you realize that Vama and Dakshina mean nothing to you because it takes both hands to clap, that's Divya Bhava. And what is it to be in Divya Bhava? To be constantly in a state of poetic rapture, encountering yourself again and again and again, in every thought, in every sensation, recognizing that nothing is heretical, nothing is impure. This is why Matangi is ucchistā, she's Chandalini, she's Pisachini, Trailokya Vashankari, Jeshta Matangi. She's just a personification of finding beauty in those things that people won't be able to find beauty in if they're attached to their rules, regulations, and notions of purity. So with that, may this be my offering of Gunjahara flowers, licked and spit upon on the feet of Matangi. Now I'm wearing clothes that I have not washed. I slept in these clothes, I woke up in these clothes. To Matangi, I will smoke this and drink this. To Matangi, we will offer everything, for she offers us beauty in everything. May this be an offering of everything to the beauty in everything, to beauty personified, to Matangini, Chandalini, Trailokya Vashankari, Jeshta Matangi. Om Hrim Klim Hum Pat Matangi Pat Swaha. Jai Ma Matangi. Mātangī Devī ki jai, Chandalini ki jai. Jai Ma. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanam Astu. Jai Ma. Jai Matangi. Guys, how do I turn the recording off?